things get exciting, here's the plan. I will join my friends and colleagues Rachel Maddow and Joy Reid and, of course, Steve Kornacki just before that 7 p.m. Eastern Time poll closing in Virginia. We will begin to get our first results, that vote count Steve keeps talking about, of the night. Until then, stay put, because the Beat with Ari Melber starts right now. Hi, Ari.
Hi, Nicole. We've been watching, and we will be watching you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend.
Absolutely. This is The Beat. I'm Ari Melber, and you can hear the music. It is election night. Steve Kornacki is at the big board right now, as mentioned, tracking all the results as we get them, exit polls, and all the voting. There are races in over 30 states tonight. There's battling for local offices, special elections, DAs, mayors, and a race for governor in 2 states. New Jersey, where polls close at 8 p.m., and Governor Murphy is trying to be the first Democratic governor to win re-election there in over 40 years. And then, of course, Virginia, which may carry many political implications across the country, not just in that state, as Terry McAuliffe and Glenn Youngkin battle it out. Polls close there within the hour. Now, it is election night, so we begin where else but exactly where we want to go and we think America wants to go, to the big board with MSNBC Steve Kornacki. Steve, take it away.
All right, Ari. Well, as you say, inside of an hour, we're waiting for real votes. Between now and then, we've got the exit poll. We've got our first look at the electorate, folks who went out and voted today. Also included in this exit poll, folks who voted early, folks who voted by mail as well. A lot of different ways of voting these days. Let's take you through some of what we're seeing here. First of all, one of the central questions for the backdrop for this governor's race, President Biden. We've talked so much about how the party that controls the White House has struggled in Virginia governor's elections. What is Joe Biden's job approval rating with Virginia voters today? Right now, this is what we're seeing, a 43% approval rating for the president. Upside down, 56% disapprove. That actually tracks pretty closely to what we saw nationally in our NBC poll that came out on the eve of the election. Nationally, we had Biden at 42. Today, the exit poll right now is putting him at 43% in Virginia. How about this one, though? Terry McAuliffe and the Democrats, they've been trying to make Donald Trump a front and center issue in this campaign, trying to attach Trump in voters' minds to Glenn Youngkin, the Republican. This is why they've been doing that. Here's voters' view of Donald Trump in Virginia. That is also extremely upside down. 41% favorable, 54% unfavorable. So is Trump going to be more of a weight on Youngkin, or is Biden going to be more of a weight on McAuliffe? One of the questions we're going to get answered with the actual votes coming in. Also, opinion of the candidates themselves. Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, actually in our exit poll, clocking in over 50% in the favorable rating for him. That is better than Terry McAuliffe in this exit poll. He's clocking in at 44% favorable. I will note the one time that Terry McAuliffe got elected governor before, back in 2013, he did struggle with that favorable rating back then as well. He was able to overcome that in 13. We will see if he's able to overcome that in 21. And again, Ari, the countdown you can see right there inside of 57 minutes. I expect shortly after 7 o'clock, county officials have been telling us they've changed the process a little bit this year for reporting out votes. This thing should really start to come to life and light up right when 7 o'clock rolls around.
And your bottom line there, Steve, on the exits, very interesting to get the favorables. They tell you something, but not everything.
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing I caution on the exit poll is 5 o'clock, we get our first look at it. There's going to be more data that's added to the exit poll. There are more interviews that are taking place as we speak, that have been taking place. So more data is going to be added to that exit poll, I think, about 45 minutes from now. So the numbers I showed you could shift a little bit. That's one thing we're going to look at. But these exit polls, they kind of take shape in waves. So we'll get another look at about 6:45. And then, 15 minutes after that, maybe we could toss the exit polls aside because we'll have real votes.
Get to the real thing. Well, a lot of insight and context, so we thank you for that, Steve. And the only thing I ask is that you promise us, Steve, don't go anywhere.
Yeah, I'm here. You don't worry about that.
Okay. Steve Kornacki at and near the big board at all times tonight. Now, we just walked through a lot of key numbers. Polls are open, which means we emphasize we certainly don't know any results. But let's dig into that gap on favorability that Steve just mentioned. Exit polling shows that Virginia voters today do have this more favorable view of what is essentially a new Republican than the Democrat they already know who used to be governor. That 53% majority with a favorable opinion of Youngkin, who's new to politics and pretty much introducing himself, 44% unfavorable. In contrast, 53% of Virginia voters here in these new exit polls tonight have an unfavorable opinion of the Democrat McAuliffe, only 44% with a favorable view of him. That could mean a lot It also gives us a picture of how some voters feel. Whether they dislike the Democrat and still pull the lever for him is completely possible. As Steve mentioned, McAuliffe has never had favorability through the roof. Now, this race has been nationalized. McAuliffe, the Democrat, relentlessly trying to tie Youngkin to Trump. As the New York Times put it here in a closing article, they're fixating on how racial inequality is taught in schools on the right and cultural issues. These are themes that have been channeled or echoed by voters that our own NBC teams have caught up with.
The important issues this year was education.
Schools, the issues that are going on in schools right now.
The biggest issue is what we're doing about the pandemic.
I believe McAuliffe hurt himself a lot with saying parents had no place to talk about education. That hurt him a lot, and that took away my support.
The whole big part of his pitch was that if you elect Glenn Youngkin, you're electing another Donald Trump. Did that work for you?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, especially after the January 6th incident. I feel that anyone that has ties to him is a problem for our country.
When you look at the attempt to paint Youngkin as another Donald Trump, you know, it just doesn't wash.
That's just some of what we're hearing from voters. The candidates also making their final pitches here as these close are about to close.
But let me be clear, what we won't do is teach our children to view everything through a lens of race, where we divide them into buckets.
Donald Trump wants to win here tomorrow night so he can next day announce for president of the United States of America, where we're going to put an end to Donald Trump's future plans right here in Virginia.
Our special election night coverage begins now with Cecile Richards, co-founder of the women's group Supermajority, Showtime's Alex Wagner, University of Virginia's Larry Sabato, and MSNBC senior national correspondent Chris Jansing live on the ground in Virginia. We could start anywhere, but Larry, what's the most important thing to understand about this special state with its special off-year race?
In an off-year race like this, even when turnout is high, one party tends to show up disproportionately. When Donald Trump was president, the Democrats showed up disproportionately. If the early exit poll is accurate, and I've been looking at exit polls since the 1970s, so we need to be cautious. They do evolve, as Steve noted, they evolve throughout the night. But if that is representative, then the Democrats have a problem, no question about it.
And we're a long way from making any calls here. That is done in the scientific process and the polls are open. But Cecile, your reaction to what Larry's saying that he's seeing and what is that partial data?
Well, I think, again, it's early to say, but clearly women are going to play a critical role as they have every single cycle, particularly suburban women. I know that's one of the things we have been really focused on in American Bridge is making sure they know what the Biden agenda is, what's happening in Washington. I think that the real hard thing here is that women are exhausted after 4 years of Donald Trump, and they're pretty much turned off by politics, and so getting turnout up is going to be critical. We'll see what happens here in Virginia. I know it was interesting to see that the issue of access to safe and legal abortion and reproductive health care, something that Governor McAuliffe was very strong on, was actually a very good issue for him, not a good issue for Glenn Youngkin. But all of these, I think all of this will be really instructive as we go into the midterms, where, again, suburban women and women in general will make the difference. Yeah, and
let's take that point to Alex. You've followed a lot of races. Trump is a shorthand when it comes to women's issues, when it comes to diversity, when it comes to a lot of these things. And just again, to show folks, because people are busy and they may not have been following Virginia all week or all month, here's exactly what McAuliffe and Biden, the Democrats, have been closing on, which is making everything Trump when it comes to the Republican ticket in Virginia. Take a look.
He's created hatred and division just like Donald Trump.
Terry is running against an acolyte of Donald Trump.
We don't want Trump. We don't want Youngkin.
He won't allow Donald Trump to campaign for him in this state.
Would you rally with Donald Trump if he came to Virginia this week?
Well, he's not coming.
What's he trying to hide? Is he embarrassed?
Alex?
Yeah, it's a really awkward position that Glenn Youngkin is in, given the fact that he wants to pull Trump supporters into his electorate and into his voting public, but he doesn't actually want Donald Trump to come to the Commonwealth of Virginia. But look, I mean, all right, the fact of the matter is Terry McAuliffe has played the Trump card repeatedly on the campaign trail. We've all seen him do it. The question is whether Virginia voters believe him. We know that Glenn Youngkin's message on education is resonating. It is something that has brought large crowds to his speeches and campaign events. And if you look at those exit polls, education is the #2 issue. That is not usually what's happening. And Youngkin has found a device that I think you will surely see in use in 2022, which is using schools as a locus for a host of cultural issues that Republicans want to wage a cultural battle over. There in schools, they can talk about this phantom critical race theory that's not actually taught, but they can attack liberal overreach on what they see as cultural and racial sensitivities. They can go after LGBTQ issues. They can talk about charter schools. There's just a number of things that prove useful in the sort of usually anodyne topic of education. And you're seeing that resonate in Virginia. So no matter, I mean, this is going to be a close race. But I think Youngkin is providing a really valuable playbook for Republicans, no matter who ends up winning this tonight.
And Chris, you're out there on the ground reporting. What are you seeing?
Yeah, whether you talk to voters or yesterday I went to 2 Youngkin events, every single voter who was supporting Glenn Youngkin mentioned education. Now, a lot of them did also mention the economy. They talked about the price of bread and milk, but it's clear that that's resonating. I should also say that when I talk to supporters of Terry McAuliffe, what resonates with them is they don't want to return to the time of Trump. But as one analyst told me, a Republican who was supporting Glenn Youngkin, he said, angry voters vote. And that was what he was hanging his hat on. Now, I just got off the phone with the McAuliffe team. I asked them what they're seeing in terms of turnout. They said in some of the key areas for them, and I'm going to quote them, they say, we are seeing ridiculously high turnout, way over the midterms. They said that if they got that high turnout, when I was speaking to them yesterday, that they would feel confident. Tonight, what they're saying is, but we have to see who those folks are. Going back to the whole idea that this momentum seemed to be with Glenn Youngkin. 1,000 people turned out here in Blue Loudoun County for him last night. They had to march across some fields at the county fairgrounds to get to his event, and they did it. They were buying T-shirts and hats. He got 200 to an airport in the middle of a Monday afternoon, so that momentum is clearly there. But I would say that the nervousness and anxiety on the ground here is very high, Ari.
Larry, you hear Chris's reporting there and what she was hearing from these campaigns, including the hedging on that turnout. What's your reaction?
Well, the hedging is appropriate because high turnout on its own means nothing. You have to know who it is that's turning out in major numbers. And as I looked around the turnout figures this afternoon, it was pretty clear to me that while black turnout was higher than some Democrats had feared, it certainly wasn't through the roof in most of the places I looked at. Whereas there is a pattern of quite high turnout in some suburban localities that Democrats have won recently, but contain a lot of independent Republicans who couldn't stand Trump, but may be looking for a way to return to the house of their mothers and fathers. So it was a very mixed picture, and I think Chris is right about that.
Alex, what do you think about that? Because, of course, we just witnessed the national election in 2020 where the Democrats, led by Biden, spent a lot of time trying to make those Republicans feel at home because they were up for grabs. What Larry's suggesting, what Chris is reporting that's out there is some of them may be less up for grabs if they don't believe the message we just discussed, if they have not actually accepted the idea that this candidate equals Trump.
Well, yeah, and you couple that. You look at the national polling on Biden. 71% of the country thinks that America's on the wrong track. 40% of the Democratic Party doesn't want to see Joe Biden at the top of the ticket in 2024. Those are not good indicators for Democrats, right? I mean, I think when it comes to Republicans, one cannot. Let's remember, Ari, Joe Biden didn't get the nomination. I don't mean to be a rain cloud over the Biden presidency, but Joe Biden did not get the nomination because he stoked the ardor of the Democratic electorate. He became the nominee because he could coalesce the party, and they thought he could beat Trump. When Trump's no longer on the ticket, do people come out to vote? Do Republicans feel the same necessity to come out and support the Democrat? The anyone but Trump strategy doesn't work when Trump's not actually on the ticket. And I think you might see some of that play out in Virginia. And the other thing I'll tell you, just from being in Virginia and covering these events, Glenn Youngkin I went to an Asians for Youngkin event. The Republican Party is desperate not to be a white tent party. They have long thought that their message of economic conservatism and social conservatism could resonate with the Latinx Hispanic community, and low taxes, some of the more fiscally conservative approaches, could resonate with the Asian community. And I'm telling you, if Youngkin wins and he can bring more Asians and other people of color into the mix, again, this is going to be the formula that Republicans try and duplicate in 2022. Likewise, Democrats are going to really have to rethink how much Trump and the existential despair of the GOP is truly going to motivate voters in a midterm election.
Yeah, so I'll let Cecile respond to that, having worked alongside a lot of Democratic candidates. What do you think of that argument? There is also the corollary that Biden and McAuliffe, according to the exit polls, are underwater, unfavorable. That's never a great thing. And yet we checked this for our coverage tonight. Obama was underwater in 2013, as was McAuliffe. Kornacki reminded us of that as well, when McAuliffe did eke out that victory. So these things are relevant, but not always predetermined. I'm curious your reaction to all of the above, Cecile.
Well, look, I think it's clearly McAuliffe is going against historic trends here. I mean, it's always tough in Virginia for the party that's in power to win the Virginia race. So put that aside. I think headed into 2022, everything Alex said is right. I mean, the Republican Party has got to figure out how to diversify their base, and maybe Glenn Youngkin has done a tiny bit of that in Virginia. But look, if going forward, looking at next November, we will have passed a massive infrastructure bill. We will have passed help for women, everything from child care, the child tax cut, support for taking care of your elders in their homes, everything that is so popular in the Biden plan, which is, of course, why every Republican is voting against every single piece of it and trying to throw sand in the gear. So clearly, this election is happening at a critical moment, in a very tough moment. But that's going to be different in November 2022. And again, I think women are going to look and see who are the folks who've actually been on my side, who are passing legislation, enacting things, putting checks in my pockets, getting my kids back to school, and who's the party that's actually trying to keep anything from progressing. And I think, look, Glenn Youngkin may have done a good job of sort of like fading the Donald Trump support. That's going to be much harder for Republicans when we get into next November. He's going to be a weight around their neck every step of the way.
Yeah, a lot of key points here with folks who know their way around these races. Cecile, Alex, Larry, and Chris, my thanks to each of you for kicking us off. It is election night here. We are going to look at the Republican rhetoric on one of those other issues that we just mentioned, the classroom. And is education now a kind of a code for getting into racial strife? Also, the man who put Obama and Biden in the White House, David Plouffe, live on a big night. Stay with us.
We're going to win. I think we're going to win in Virginia.
If my base turns out, he's going to win. And I hope they turn out. I really want them to turn out.
We should play a big part in our kids' education.
Parents being involved and having a choice and having a say in what's going on in our schools.
Education. It is a once routine, even dry policy issue that has turned absolutely electric in this Virginia race being decided tonight, polls closing within the hour. Here's why education is shifting, why it's almost become something of a buzzword that is apart from its definition of providing information or knowledge to people. Republicans out of power are seizing on schools as the place to stir up racial tension and culture wars. Virginia, for example, does not formally teach this framework of critical race theory. It is more of a collegiate or academic level lens for analyzing racism's role in history. But the Republican candidate's closing argument of all the things going on, jobs, COVID, etc., no, it's a pledge that this thing that is not in Virginia schools won't come to Virginia.
And so let me be clear. Let me be clear, on day one, we will not have political agendas in the classroom, and I will ban critical race theory.
Now, that would maintain the status quo. Democrats arguing this whole thing is a distraction and a retooled Southern strategy to stoke race while pretending that the discussion is about classrooms. Now, the Democrat, former Governor McAuliffe, has fact-checked Youngkin on this issue and the wider idea that school curriculum should somehow be subject to political parent vetoes or even banning books.
The parents had the right to veto books, Glenn, not to be knowledgeable about it, also take them off the shelves. And I'm not going to let parents come into schools and actually take books out and make their own decision.
I'm joined now by Che Komanduri, a political strategist, veteran of 3 presidential campaigns, including the Obama campaign, and a friend of the beat, editor-at-large for the 19th, Aaron Haynes. Good to see you both. Che, it is election night. We'll get into all of it. But on this issue that has not only been a big closing issue, but now that we have these exit polls, is the basically second highest ranking issue for Virginia voters who talked to exit pollsters today after jobs. Is this really about education?
No, it's not at all about education. It's actually about using education, and specifically the term parents' rights, as an umbrella term for a lot of nefarious ideas and things. Glenn Youngkin talks about parents' rights, and he uses it to sneak in ideas like the deep state ideology of Donald Trump when he talks about the FBI going after parents, which is nonsense. He uses it to sneak in anti-vax sentiment, saying that kids don't need to be vaccinated to go to school against COVID. He uses it, quite frankly, to sneak in racism, which is what the critical race theory argument that he's making is all about. Critical race theory is not being taught in Virginia schools. Glenn Youngkin saying he's going to ban it is like him saying he's going to ban unicorns. It is a useless thing that he is saying. However, what he's really doing is he's sending a signal to his Trumpist base that I'm with you on how you feel about the way this country is changing.
Very clearly put. Aaron, I'm curious your views. This really dovetails with some of what our guests were talking about at the top of the program, and whether or not this race will land on the idea that the Republican is synonymous with Trump, very Trumpy, MAGA, take your pick, or a different kind of Republican. Che arguing here that in those racial appeals, it's much closer to Trumpism. Your view?
Well, look, all right, lest there be any confusion, critical race theory is the big lie of 2021. It is, as you mentioned, the modern-day Southern strategy to appeal to white voters. Last year, it was the fear of a rigged election and voter fraud. In 2018, it was the phantom migrant horde that was headed for the southern border. Education is the 2021 version of the economic grievance kind of code buzzword of 2016. And that is because race-based appeals are an increasingly perennial aspect of GOP politics. I mean, it's one that, you know, former President Trump capitalized on certainly in his elections, but it's not new to President Trump. And current candidates are testing this strategy to really see how successful it can remain going forward.
Yeah, and this really goes to where the politics are headed in this year. And then, of course, we have the national midterms next year, Che, because these things sometimes work by appealing to one group and understanding, oh, that's as you put it, white grievance MAGA culture, while other people who are less politically informed might say, well, what's wrong with parents' rights? I mean, if parents' rights means that you have input on aspects of, for example, your family's autonomy or how your children are treated, fine. I mean, if that's what parents' rights means. But if what it means is code for saying, oh, we're going to make the 6th or 8th grade classroom the battleground for racial debates that were not in the classroom but for this right-wing approach, that seems misleading at best. Reading from coverage here, this is from Juan Williams, Parents' Rights is code for white race politics. He said it's not long ago that racist Southern politicians rallied against integration with an argument for states' rights. Now the message is that white parents are being ignored when they complain that their children are uncomfortable learning about racism. That's from a longtime analyst, but a self-described moderate and longtime Fox News analyst, Juan Williams, basically saying, wait, be honest about what this is, and don't forget that America's classrooms, our schools, were ground zero for racist white attacks in politics and against integration for a long time.
Yeah, and the problem for Democrats is, historically speaking, the states' rights appeal did work. The Southern strategy did work for Republicans. And the same thing is happening again right before our eyes. States' rights sounds very reasonable. Of course, states have rights. But the GOP used states' rights to sneak in all kinds of causes. First and foremost, the maintenance of Jim Crow. But then later, it expanded to fighting environmental regulations and labor regulations. all of these things became part of states' rights. And what the GOP has found is that parents' rights serves the same function. It is the new states' rights. It is an umbrella term that sounds reasonable. Of course, parents love their children. They should have a say in their education, which is why we have a PTA. That's why we have parent-teacher conferences. That's why we have school boards. That's why we have school board meetings and school board elections. All of these things parents can participate in. And every teacher I have encountered has told me they wish parents would participate more in these things that have been set up for them, not less.
Right, but in a real way,
yeah. But the problem is that this is being used as code for all kinds of MAGA-related causes. And the problem for Democrats is it has all worked before.
And you use that word code, Aaron. I want to get your reaction to something that's gotten a lot of attention. You know, we fact-check stuff before we take it from the internet to television, but this is a real video that went viral, millions of views, where it really shows that the acronym for this, code, as Jay put it, is something that's riling people up, but then they don't necessarily even know anything about it. Take a look.
And what is critical race theory?
Well, I'm not going to get into the specifics of it because I don't understand it that much, but it's something that I don't, what little bit that I know, I don't care for.
And what have you heard that you don't,
well,
that you don't like?
I'm not going to, you know, I don't have that much knowledge on it, but it's something that I don't care for.
Aaron?
Sure, because he didn't learn it in school, and you know, it's like unless he went to law school and likely at a historically black college or somewhere else where they are teaching critical race theory at the law school level, because that is where critical race theory is being taught. Listen, this fight isn't even about critical race theory, Ari. You know this. You know, we talk about states' rights. States' rights is already you know, in full effect here in the wake of the 2020 election. States' rights is what the voter suppression effort is about. States' rights is what we're seeing happen with the abortion, the ongoing fight for reproductive rights in this country. States' rights is what's happening with the transgender attacks right now happening in this country at the state level. But Republicans are attempting to redefine and kind of weaponize critical race theory in this area of academia to really fit into the ongoing culture war to really, you know, erase history, frankly. I mean, the 1619 Project has been part of this. The case for tearing down Confederate monuments was part of this. The settled matter of what the Civil War was about, and just to be clear, it was about slavery, not states' rights, is absolutely part of this. But, you know, people who are on this side of the argument know that history cannot be changed, but it can be forgotten if it's not taught. And we as a country, I thought, had already learned this lesson, and yet we find ourselves here again because race does remain so potent in our politics.
Right, a living history with an echo. And Aaron, it's election night, but was it not Lil Wayne who said, the past isn't prologue, it isn't even past? Or was that a different writer?
I believe that was the rapper William Faulkner, also from the South, though. I get your confusion.
You know what? It was Lil Faulkner. I did get confused, and I appreciate the literary fact check. Aaron and Che, good to have you both on the big night. We have our shortest break in election coverage, 60 seconds. We're also half an hour to polls closing in Virginia. Obama's former campaign manager, David Bluff, and we're back in 1 minute.
I didn't even look at the Republican candidate.
Nuva, I'm good to go.
Ask your doctor about once monthly Cabenuva.
I didn't even look at the Republican candidate because of the last 4 years, honestly.
When you look at the attempt to paint Youngkin as another Donald Trump, you know, it just doesn't wash.
We're tracking all kinds of races across the nation. It's this off-year election tonight. National politics, though, most fixated on Virginia, where polls close within half an hour. Republicans testing this culture war strategy we've been covering. It tries to tap Trumpism while claiming distance from Donald Trump, the person. Democrats insist Trump is still effectively on the ballot as long as the Republican Party remains this extreme. And Terry McAuliffe, you see on your screen there, selling competence on COVID and the economy and experience. But if a president is a drag on the party, well, it could actually be Biden, who has a 56% disapproval in those new exit polls among Virginia voters today. 28% say their vote is to express opposition against Biden. The ray of hope for Democrats here? Well, last time when McAuliffe won in an off year, a similar 54% of Virginians at the time disapproved of then-President Obama, who also went on to re-election. An architect of those winning strategies is David Plouffe, Barack Obama's 2008 campaign manager, a former senior advisor in the White House, and someone who all Democrats turn to for insight and counsel. So interesting to have you on the big night.
Election night 2021.
2021.
Here we go.
Let's start with that comparison. Obama and McAuliffe were underwater, as you experts like to say, but managed to win. Could Terry McAuliffe pull that off tonight, or is it different?
No, he could. I think the question here is, this is a really, now 2013 was a tough environment for Terry too, but we just can't compare this election night to a year ago, okay? I think a lot of Americans, including Virginia, thought we were going to be largely done with the pandemic. Delta reared its head. Economy is growing, but not as quickly as we'd like. Gas prices, which I will tell you, when gas prices are this high before an election, voters are really cranky. Other cost of living matters. Terry's a repeat candidate. I think that doesn't work as well these days as it used to. So a bunch of things that make the terrain challenging. So I think you look at Biden's approval number, which is 43, I think, approve. Trump's is 41. So the question is, we see Youngkin in the exits. And by the way, I've been through exits being as wrong as anything can be wrong in the world. So let's be careful about it. But which of those two candidates, McAuliffe or Youngkin, can more outperform their standard bearer? And I think you would still say Trump is the Republican standard bearer. And do some of these people who say education, I was struck in the exit polls anyway, they might be wrong, even though it was such a number, I think it was the number 2 issue. Youngkin only won them by 18 points, and that's a signature issue. So, yeah, I think this is going to be a very, very close race. But my point in terms of what does this mean, it means a lot who the governor of Virginia is if you live in Virginia. But for 2022, whether McAuliffe loses by 1 or 2 or wins by 1 or 2, there's a big delta between what Biden won by last time. So Democrats have to really figure out which voters have moved and why.
And by delta, you mean?
Well, Biden won it by 10. We'll learn something in New Jersey, too. Murphy won that by 16. Does he win by close to that, 12, or is it more like 6 or 8? So this is not unusual. Usually those 2 governor's races depart a lot from the previous year's presidential race. But I do think you'd have to look at what happened with swing voters, what happened with the Republican turnout, what happened with Democratic turnout, really do a lot of research, quantitative and qualitative, and also know you've got a year to fix it, because Democrats lost House seats in 2020 when Biden won Virginia by 10. So to basically hold on to the House, I think you've got to think, how do we get back to the point where we're winning states like Virginia by 10 again?
Right, which for you is kind of an alarm for the Democratic Party without making any prediction about tonight, which we don't do around here. The other question is the flip side. Why, in your view, is Glenn Youngkin up in the favorable view among so many Virginia voters? Is it because of something about him or that he's new?
Well, I think part of it's his new, but I mean, I think the conversation about Youngkin on social media, so I live in California, I get a lot of what's happening in that race through social media, is about the ad about banning books, the rally. Those 2 things are super offensive. But this guy has spent enormous amount of money running ads, basically being Mitt Romney.
Now, hold on, David. Are you suggesting you can't rely on Twitter for all of your news and views of the world?
Yeah, maybe sports and weather, okay, but not politics.
So let's develop this point, because, of course, we've seen some of that in the heat of that. And to be clear, the Biden-McAuliffe strategy was to focus on that. You're saying that he may have broke through, at least on the favorable side, whether he wins or not, on what other issues on the ground?
Well, I think on being more moderate, being a kinder, gentler Republican. I think he's run ads talking about he wants to increase education spending. He wants to increase teacher pay. So it's not just the right-wing crazy stuff. So I think he did a good job in the beginning. He had to hug Trump in the primary. I think he's paid a price the last 2 or 3 weeks for his association with Trump. But I think he spent some time basically saying, I'm not Trump. I'm a different kind of Republican. I'm a Virginia kind of Republican. And we know in states like that, listen, Larry Hogan, governor of Massachusetts. You've got Larry Hogan in Maryland, Baker in Massachusetts. Those if they can portray themselves as moderate Republicans, they still have a shot, even in a state like Virginia.
Let me ask you also about the other part of politics, which is this momentum, this existential feeling of, are you going the right way or not? We cover this. We talk to a lot of people. Right after the stimulus checks were cut, there was this feeling, however vague, about a Biden momentum, and people felt like it was really hitting them, and it was kind of in the conversation. And right now, it's something like the opposite of momentum. There's a mood that maybe Biden / the Democrats aren't, quote unquote, getting it done in Washington, trying hard enough. Why is it taking so long to pass the thing? News viewers know, you know, from being inside a White House, that may melt away if you get progress. We've discussed that, right? It may melt away. You get that 50th vote, but that momentum certainly is not strong right now. And you don't have to take my word for it. A top Virginia Democrat, Mark Warner, saying that. Take a listen.
I wish we would have gone ahead and passed the infrastructure bill back in September. It would have given the president a big win. I think it would have made the race in Virginia a lot better for Terry McAuliffe, but we are where we are.
Is that true or wishful thinking from someone who's both in Virginia and wants that thing to pass?
Well, he's also won, Senate and governor's races there. I would say this. I don't think it would be a lot better, but it would be better. The one thing to remember is Virginia, particularly those large vote-producing suburban areas, they're actually paying attention to what's happening in Washington much more than you'd find elsewhere. So I think in a lot of states, this would be more background noise that activists might care about, and they're important too. But I think in Virginia, maybe a little bit more. But listen, I think when the rescue package passed, that was also before the Delta variant had basically recaptured the country. So I think people were really hopeful. Biden comes in, we're getting shots in arms, they got a rescue package. We can see the other side of it. Here we are, deep into 2021, and we're still struggling with COVID, despite the enormous progress we've made. And you've got cost of living that's high to the extent people are frustrated about lack of action in Washington. That's happening. I also think McAuliffe, has done a good job of trying to put Youngkin on trial. Murphy's done that in New Jersey. But the national debate has just been Democrat versus Democrat. You really haven't swung the Republican into the ring. And that has to be part of next year, is got to do a better job of defining what Democrats have fought for and won and how they delivered for you, the voter. But then you've got to crucify these Republicans. Okay, embracing white nationalism, embracing the insurrectionists. Basically, they've extended the pandemic. Talking down vaccines, talking down masks, lying through their teeth, basically they're very comfortable running race campaigns now. So if you can't beat these guys in 2022, we got a problem in my view. But I think you got to be really tough. And I think we've got to get a little bit out of, academic language and get a little more guttural in terms of how we're talking both about what Democrats are doing, but who Republicans are screwing.
Yeah, well, and so then you mentioned New Jersey, and you widen out, and we know why people are focused so much on Virginia. But you have the governor's race in New Jersey. You have New York City, which has a bunch of races that tend to favor just a highly Democratic registration advantage. But you still have a big mayor's race there where you had kind of the former police officer who also says he's for civil rights win out. Some MSNBC viewers may recall Maya Wiley was one of the alternative candidates, came in second. Andrew Young, a Democrat, people know. You have a DA's race. There you go. Independent. DA's race. Yeah, so what about any of those other races? Are you watching any of those? Is there anything that could be interesting there tonight?
I think you'll look for turnout in all of them, even though they're different. Because off-year elections, swing voters matter a great deal, as they always do, but turnout's incredibly important. So I think you're looking for Democratic enthusiasm. You're also looking for Republican enthusiasm. Reports would suggest that turnout's quite high in Virginia today, but report would also suggest it's high in blue and red areas. Yep. So we have to learn from that. So I think what you need to do is if you're running a race in 2022, if you're a candidate in 2022, if you're Pelosi or Schumer running the DGA, the White House, you got to spend a lot of time studying this. What happened? It's harder to know why it happened, so you got to do research and understand. I'm optimistic.
What is this? Is this not as good turnout as possible, or what is the this that they have to study?
So you've got to look at if swing voters behave differently this November from last November. Who were they and why? Turnout. Were there variances in young African-American voters, in the Latino vote, with Asian voters, suburban voters? What did Republicans do? Were they able to get strong turnout despite Trump not being on the ballot? You got to bake all that in. I think the environment for Democrats will be better next year, because I think hopefully the pandemic will largely be in our rearview mirror. Economy should be surging. Biden and Democrats should have accomplishments. Republicans, I think, are quite vulnerable if you run a smart campaign against them. But you cannot mistake the challenge. The thing I'm most concerned about is if Republicans are able to generate strong turnout. Hell, Trump almost won because his turnout, I think, beat expectations in 20. Democratic turnout was historic in 18, but Republicans also had strong turnout where they needed it. So that to win swing congressional districts and Senate races, you have to do both, particularly in an off year. You've got to meet your turnout mark, and you've got to win swing voters. You cannot choose. And so you've got to look at what happens tonight across the country super carefully and not assume it's cement, But understand that to ignore it would be at your peril.
The other thing we wanted to get you on, so we've just got David Plouffe here, who Barack Obama literally picked to help him get to the White House, and you did it. You also have experience in this other thing in the Democratic Party that is a very difficult dance that has become more common as Republican extremism has been mainlined. And it's what Barack Obama dealt with, which is how much time do you spend rebutting and disproving lies and the crazy, because you don't leave it unanswered, without overdoing it. And as you know, and everyone who watches the news knows, sometimes Democrats have seemed to overreact to all these things. We're coming off an insurrection and the big lie. And now you have people, we see this in Virginia, but it apparently may be the new MO in many races where Republicans are actually just trying to lie and claim that anything going towards the Democrats means there's voter fraud and all of the attacks on the vote and confidence. Newt Gingrich, in your view, may not be such a high standard to begin with, but historically, he's getting worse than he used to be, and the claims and lies are coming louder and earlier than they used to. So again, I always tell viewers, I'm not playing this because it is newsworthy and true. I'm playing it because it's a newsworthy lie. For David Plouffe's analysis, briefly, Newt Gingrich here, before any results come in Virginia. Take a look.
Does Youngkin need to win for this to have the maximum impact? What if it's really tight?
No, if it's really, look, if it's first of all, it's really tight, they'll steal it. So you can't afford to have a really tight election. You have to win by a big enough margin they can't steal it.
This is that Trumpified groundwork. How much, in your view, should this be addressed, tackled, fact-checked, rebutted, and how much of it should be just pushed to the side until it's actually real in the courts and you only deal with it then?
Such a great question. We'll nerd out a little bit in terms of politics. This is why we do a lot of research with voters, because even the critical race theory BS that's made up in Virginia by Youngkin, I think if he wins tonight, people assume that's going to sweep the Republicans to every election victory next year. I highly doubt that. I think you're going to find some states and some candidates where that won't fly. So here's what I know has to happen. If the Build Back Better and infrastructure bill passes, and I think they will, we've seen polling. Nobody in America knows what's in it outside of people. So you've got to educate them about what's in it. Who's, by the way, the billionaires and big companies paying for it, that's even more popular than the popular stuff in the bill. You got to do storytelling along the way. You've got to make clear that the Republicans opposed all of that. You've got to make most voters support mask mandates. They've supported vaccination mandates. They support climate change. They support expanding health care. We're winning the issues. The problem is, even when we're getting 60 to 65% of people on issues, we're losing some of them on head-to-head races. So I think we also have to improve the way we deliver those messages, make it stronger, more guttural, more controversial even. And also don't let them be the only ones playing the culture war. Like Josh Hawley talking about, oh, these poor men in America don't work anymore, and they're obsessed with video games and pornography because their masculinity is being challenged. How ridiculous is that? Like, mock these people, I think, and be a little tougher. But understand that Newt Gingrich, he is now the rule.
Right.
That is the rule.
Yeah.
So if you go to a boxing match, they're going to come in with heavier gloves and a knife in their boot. They're not going to play fair. You just have to know that.
And you know your way around that. David Plouffe, our special guest here on a big night. Thank you. That does it for me, Ari Melber. But don't go anywhere, because our special coverage with Rachel, Nicole, Joy, and Steve at the big board picks up early right after this.
Happy election night. Thank you for being here. This is very exciting. I'm Rachel Maddow, here on the mothership in New York City, with all that means. I'm joined by my colleagues Joy Reid and Nicole Wallace. The special occasion putting all three of us into the same room tonight in the direct line of sight of our beloved Steve Kornacki and his big board is because it is election night, not everywhere, but in a bunch of cities and states across the country that tonight are deciding some crucial questions. Tonight, voters in the state of Virginia have gone to the polls to elect a new governor. Virginia voters cannot ever re-elect a governor directly. The state prohibits governors from running for consecutive terms. This year, the outgoing Democratic governor, Ralph Northam, will be replaced either by Trump-endorsed Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin, the very wealthy head of a famous private equity firm called the Carlyle Group,
or they will bring back a previous Democratic governor of Virginia, Democrat Terry McAuliffe. McAuliffe led the Commonwealth from 2013 to 2017. He is running tonight to get that job back. Now, if historical trends and patterns hold sway, Republicans should have the edge here. Going all the way back to the 1970s, every time a new U.S. president has been elected to the White House, that president's party has gone on the following year to lose the Virginia governor's race. So with Democrat Joe Biden winning the presidency for the first time last year, history suggests the Republican candidate, Glenn Youngkin, will win tonight. That said, history doesn't get a vote. Virginians do. And recent polling has had this race basically tied, well within the margin of error of most polls. Now, we've had our eyes on other important races tonight, too. New Jersey voters are going to be deciding this evening whether to re-elect their Democratic governor, Phil Murphy. There are also important mayor's races tonight in New York City, in Boston, Atlanta, Minneapolis, and a really, really interesting race in Buffalo, New York. We will have more on that to come over the course of the evening tonight. But for now, our first point of focus is on Virginia. Right now, we are minutes away, about 17 minutes away from the polls closing in that state. Again, the Democrats hoping to hold on to this governorship in Virginia. We'll also be watching the state legislature in Virginia tonight. Democrats are also trying to hold on to control of the now democratically controlled House of Delegates. There's a lot at stake. Let's jump into it. We turn naturally to the great Steve Kornacki, who has been marinating in the data and the polls and the exits now for as long as we've had access to them. Steve, what should we expect over the course of the night? How do you think tonight's going to unfold?
Yeah, Rachel, well, here we go. Strap yourselves in. The clock you see ticking down inside of 6 minutes now till polls close in Virginia, and then we start getting actual results. So right now, this map is blank, McAuliffe versus Youngkin. But based on talking to the county election officials here in Virginia, they've been sending signals that this thing could start to light up pretty dramatically pretty quickly after 7 o'clock. It's kind of a technical explanation, but essentially, Virginia has changed some of the procedures for reporting out the vote that should make it much easier to get vote reported out this year. For instance, I'll give you one example right here. This is Fairfax County I'm circling. You're going to be hearing a lot about Fairfax County tonight. It is the biggest county in the state. About 1 out of every 7 votes in the entire state of Virginia is going to come out of Fairfax County. Fairfax County is historically one of the latest to report in Virginia. In fact, back in 2020, a year ago, it was 11:45 p.m. that they in Fairfax reported out the lion's share of their vote. Election officials in Fairfax believe they're going to be reporting out a massive chunk of their vote within minutes of the polls closing at 7 o'clock tonight. So Fairfax is sort of exhibit A there potentially, but a lot of other counties may be a lot quicker in Virginia than they were in 2020. One thing that could change is historically, the pattern in Virginia has been that in this scoreboard, this running tally you see on the screen, historically, Republicans get out to an early lead because historically it's the rural counties that report first, and then we're waiting on the Fairfax counties of Virginia. But if they have managed to streamline things procedurally, that historical pattern may be different. It may be McAuliffe who gets out to the lead tonight. So we will see. That's one thing to keep an eye on. The other thing here is talking to the campaigns today, talking to Democrats and Republicans in Virginia. The one thing I've heard agreement on from them today is they both believe there has been very high turnout in Virginia today. It's funny, you talk to Democrats, they are very afraid that Republicans have turned out their voters. You talk to Republicans, they are very afraid that Democrats have turned out their voters. So we will see if there was a winner in the turnout battle when this board starts lighting up. But before we get the results here, just give you a quick sense here. This is the backdrop. This was Virginia a year ago. A year ago, the Democrats won this state. They won it with ease. Joe Biden won by 10 points. Here's what we're looking for very quickly as the results come in tonight. I mentioned Fairfax County, the biggest in the state. This is a Democratic vote center. Joe Biden won this county by 42 points over Donald Trump. It is a big reason why Biden got that double-digit victory statewide. This is right outside Washington, D.C. Key question tonight. It's a question in Fairfax. It's a question in all of northern Virginia. It's a question in the Richmond suburbs as well. These metropolitan areas that, especially in the Trump era, moved dramatically away from the Republican Party. Can Glenn Youngkin, without Trump as president anymore, can he make inroads here? Let me show you what I mean. Trump lost by 42. But if you look at Fairfax County before Donald Trump came along, this is the last presidential election before Donald Trump. Mitt Romney in 2012. Romney got blown out here, but you see the margin was only 20. Losing Fairfax County by 20 points if you're a Republican is a world of a difference between winning it and losing it by 42 points, as Trump did. This takes you out of the game completely statewide. But if Youngkin can win back some of those voters that Republicans gave up in the Trump era, that could put him in the game statewide. So we want to see if Youngkin is making inroads in Northern Virginia and in the Richmond suburbs. The other big question we're asking tonight, kind of circle a big swath of Virginia here, Southwest Virginia, the Shenandoah Valley. You're seeing core Republican areas here. Believe it or not, Republicans actually got stronger in this part of the state during Donald Trump's presidency. A lot of these are very small counties, but you add them together, there can be some significant vote there all added together. Let me give you an example of this, though. Take a look here at small Allegheny County. Donald Trump won this by 44 points. Look what it was like for Republicans here before Donald Trump came along. They were barely winning. Mitt Romney only won this county by 3. Trump won it by 44. So Republicans made gains by leaps and bounds in some areas of this state during Donald Trump's presidency. That's another question tonight. Can Glenn Youngkin, without Donald Trump as president, can Republicans keep those gains that Donald Trump helped them make? That's the combination that would win this night for Glenn Youngkin. Inroads in the suburbs with equal Trump enthusiasm in those core Southwest, Shenandoah Valley, rural areas of the state. That's the balancing act he's been trying to strike as a candidate. That's how you could erase, if you're a Republican, a 10-point gap statewide. So again, when this board starts lighting up in a few minutes, you can expect we'll be looking a lot at those areas, those counties. Also, I should mention, Hampton Roads, the closest thing to a real bellwether swing area in the state, right down here in Virginia Beach, largest city in the state, 450,000 people. And look at this one. Trump won it in 2016. It flipped to the Democrats. It flipped to Joe Biden last year. This is a very important county tonight to keep an eye on, and it could be a bellwether. Demographically, Virginia Beach looks an awful lot like the state of Virginia. So we'll be talking a lot about that as well.
Steve, we're just about 30 seconds from the polls closing, and I just want to underscore the reason we may get some results right at the polls close or within a couple minutes of the polls closing is in part because Virginia counties are not just allowed, they've been directed by voting reforms that they could start pre-processing ballots that came in, absentee ballots that came in ahead of the polls closing right now. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's the difference. In 2020, they had to wait till the mail was all counted to release the early. They could release the early right away.
All right. It is now 7 p.m. Eastern time, and the polls have closed in Virginia. Now, again, at this point, we are expecting that we will get results soon. But while we are looking at polls closing right now at 7 o'clock Eastern, this race is too early to call. Not surprising. It's only 20 seconds old. But we'll be watching, as Steve said, we'll be watching from counties large and small as they're able to turn around potentially a significant chunk of the vote that's already been cast right away, in part because they're directed by new state law, by state voting reforms, that they can start pre-processing ballots, scanning them, getting them ready to count, ready to report right when polls close. Right, Steve?
No, that's right. And we have, potentially here again, Fairfax County is a great example. They said 11:45 in 2020 because they were waiting to get all the mail ballots counted. Now they can release big chunks. Again, they've said, take these promises with a grain of salt. But election officials sometimes can be too optimistic. But they were talking within minutes of polls closing. We're going to see if that comes true here.
All right. I'm going to bring into the conversation now my beloved colleagues, Joy Reid and Nicole Wallace. It is great to see you two. Can I just say that at the top?
Amen.
It is nice to be here.
Best thing about being back.
I know, It is, man. I'm nervous, I have to say, being all back in the same studio. Not because you guys make me nervous, just because it's so different from the way we've all been working right now.
Yeah.
But it's election night, and these Virginia, I expect that we are going to see a bunch of Virginia numbers right away. I feel like part of what we sort of have to manage tonight, both in terms of our own watching it ourselves and thinking what viewers at home are seeing, is that we've all become sort of like junior Steve Kornackis. We've all become like amateur election data crunchers and be like, but in the rural areas, they're going to be reporting the absentees, which are less likely to be as democratically swayed as they were before the COVID-related reforms. I mean, we all have outthought our way through looking at some of this data, I think.
Yeah. Look, I just spoke to two. I mean, I think that's exactly right. And the thing about these nights, you know, when you're on a campaign, you're always calling the press to find out what the early exits say. And when you are sitting at these sets, you're calling the campaigns to see what their turnout numbers say. So obviously, Kornacki's going to take us through the exits. But what the campaigns are looking at are the turnout numbers as they pace with 2017. And two sources inside the McAuliffe campaign are very happy with what they're seeing relative to those numbers. I think Prince George County is 104% of the 2017 pace. Earlier in the day, some of those numbers were below 2017. I think as the day sort of closed, they caught up to a lot of those numbers. Now, the plot twist may be in some of Youngkin's choices in terms of where he closed his campaign in Loudoun County. He's hoping to squeeze some of those, hoping to shrink some of those Democratic margins in the kinds of places that Steve keeps drawing our attention to that Biden won running away. So I think just to reinforce the fact that it's going to be a long and perhaps sort of white-knuckle night.
And the McAuliffe campaign, they are correlating high turnout with bettering their chances.
So they're saying that the 2017 turnout numbers, they've exceeded them in all the Democratic counties and all the places they needed to. They're seeing some of the Republican counties beneath the 2017 pace. I think, though, we have to watch how that comes in as the night goes on because of the choices Youngkin made. He was campaigning yesterday in Loudoun. He's hoping to shrink some of those. So the turnout numbers in Democratic counties don't, at this point, we don't know yet if that's all Democratic vote.
Exactly.
And that is why I cannot count myself as a miniature Steve Kornacki because I'm completely confused. Like, this is the first time, I think, in watching politics for a really long time, like most of my adult life, that I don't really know what the numbers mean. So, you know, folks I'm texting with from the campaign, at first were a little bit down. They were not super enthusiastic in their text. They were saying, well, numbers look up, it's close, it's going to be close, it's going to be close. Then they got happier when they started seeing African-American areas and said, so it's like back to, you know, will the black voters sort of save the party? But the challenge here is on white voters. I don't know what it means when you see what is a typically Democratic county with high turnout. Because how many voters are in that county who are suburban white voters who normally Democrats could count on when they see high turnout in that county and say, aha, that's my voter. Who maybe back in the day voted for Doug Wilder, who maybe voted for Donald Trump, but who are sick and tired of hearing the race conversation. They don't like living in this post-Trump era where we're talking about white nationalism and January 6th. And Charlottesville horrified them, but they're over it. And they don't like the idea that the 1619 Project will be taught in schools. And so they're kind of a both-and voter. Maybe they also want to see a vaccine mandate, but the race stuff is so potent in American politics. It always has been. Lee Atwater knew it. You know, Ronald Reagan played that game with welfare reform. It is such a powerful argument for people who are not traditionally right-wing voters, but that it gets at an emotional toll that people feel that talking about race takes on them, and that means they're available to the Republicans.
Do you think that the race, the way that Youngkin harped on race so much as his closing message, is potentially motivating to black voters and to anti-racist voters? Did he overplay that hand in a way that may have turned out people in reaction to it?
I think he was being subtle and being really tricky and slick until he dropped that Toni Morrison ad. The Toni Morrison ad might have been the point at which he went too far. A lot of the people who heard the ad on that were sort of his maybe voters, maybe didn't even know who Toni Morrison was. But I promise you, black people know who Toni Morrison was. We grew up on her. Anybody who's my age or even a little bit younger, we read her in high school. She's the reason I wanted to be a writer. This is somebody who is beloved among black people, and particularly people who say education is important. That's why that question, I don't know what it means. If you're saying education is the most important issue, you might be a black voter who says, I'm defending great literature and defending Toni Morrison. And I don't like the idea that Youngkin wants to be a governor that would purge those books. What's next? The biography of Dr. King? Is W.E.B. Du Bois next? I mean, Dr. King said America might go to hell. Are we going to erase any of his, you know, his more sort of robust commentary on America? Is that not going to be allowed to be taught? Trust and believe he took that so far that he probably animated some African-American voters too.
I guess I don't want to be the skunk at the garden party, but I think there's a sense among Republicans that what Youngkin did was where Trump ran as a guy who was gonna ban all Muslims. Mexicans were rapists and murderers. Black people came from bleep hole countries. He was such an uncouth and flagrant, you know, debased. There was no conversation about race under him. It was beneath even people who said they voted for him. What Youngkin has done is he put it in a disguise.
Yes.
He gave it a fake name, and his candidacy is wrapped in two big lies. One is this half-truth. I flew an insurrection flag at my rally, but Trump's at arm's length. There's Trump.
Yep.
And the second big lie is that I watched his rally last Saturday. His campaign promise, and he was making this promise in Loudoun and in Alexandria, is on day one, I'm going to ban critical race theory. That is like us banning the ghosts.
Right.
There are no ghosts.
That's right.
So we can say, you know what, 7 p.m. we're banning the ghosts. There are no ghosts. There isn't critical race theory talk. But what he's done is he's laundered Trump's really sort of disgusting, flagrant racism. He's wrapped it in education, and he's given it a lie as a label. And they said he's going to ban it. There isn't any critical race theory. It's a legal theory not taught in public schools in Virginia.
It's so powerful because it takes the exhausted voter who wants to vote on what is fundamentally a racist idea, right? That you cannot teach the truth about Thomas Jefferson. You must give encomiums to Thomas Jefferson in school. Otherwise, that's critical race theory. If you even talk about enslavement, that's critical race theory. Anything that makes a white parent uncomfortable is critical race theory. And you're absolutely right. He's been very subtle and very slick. That Toni Morrison ad was too much of a blunt hammer. But everything he did up to then, I totally agree with you. He's found a way to launder a pretty racist trope, this idea that we cannot talk about America's history because it hurts my feelings. He's turned that into a campaign. And I think what Democrats have to worry about is if he succeeds and he wins, that is going to be the campaign model for every single Republican that's running in 2020.
Well, I mean, even if Youngkin comes close and doesn't win, it still will be. I mean, to have the Fox News Channel, our friends at the Fox News Channel, building their programming, particularly their primetime programming around this for months. They're building a campaign platform for conservative candidates to run on it everywhere, even though it's not actually taught anywhere, even though it's not a real thing. I mean, there's nothing you could pay for in any campaign that would equal the kind of free help you'd get from that sort of conservative media, just fire hose on the issue.
And it's the same. It's the same. To your point, it's the same play they ran. If you own a bakery or a deli, you're going to have to bake. I mean, they run this play every cycle. They did it with the wedding cakes. They're going to have to be 8 bathrooms. If you own a small restaurant, you're going to have a bathroom for. I mean, they take something that isn't real and they make it a potent issue. And I think the question after tonight, I talked to Jamie Harrison on my show today, the question for Democrats is going to be almost Rumsfeldian. Do you go on the campaign trail with the Republican Party you've got, that they lie, that they launder the Trump racism in fleece, that they have a propaganda network that reaches more people than any candidate's ads in any statewide election? Do you adjust with this new propaganda, disinformation, barely veiled dog whistle race stuff, or do you keep trying to fight on, policy?
This is the problem with Democrats, that they want to do the latter. They seem to believe that if they just do good government policy, that somehow people will understand that they are better for them. It's better for you to be with us because we're going to give you this policy, this policy, and this policy, while the Republicans are fighting with a sledgehammer. They're using like a blowtorch, and Democrats are coming out with like a fork. They don't understand. And Democrats also, I hate to say this, and it may sound mean, but the Democratic Party has not developed the reflex of defending black voters. They don't know how to do it. Even though African-American voters overwhelmingly, and brown voters, and all voters who are in a minority, they don't know how to openly defend them because they're so afraid of offending that suburban white voter who might be uncomfortable on race, and they're so desperate to get back to be able to win white voters again. They don't have the reflex and truly don't have the language to robustly defend their core voter. They haven't been able to defend them on civil rights legislation. They prefer to just drop the entire attempt to pass voting rights than really defend it. And on critical race theory, you have to come back with something and have an answer. They haven't figured out how to answer this racist trope.
There is another way in which it cuts back at them, though, right? Because there's, for the voter who is, as you're saying, Joyce, the voter who's exhausted, and the voter who wants the temperature to come down, and the voter who just wants things to get more rational and less dangerous. When you're talking about caring about education, maybe one of the things you care about is the school board members not being screamed at and threatened and doxxed and having their families threatened and all of these things, which has come with the fear-mongering around what's happening in schools, whether it's about vaccines, whether it's about masks, whether it's about this made-up stuff about racial indoctrination. I mean, the way that's played out on the ground, including in Virginia, is by teachers, school administrators, and school board members being put in the bullseye.
Yeah.
And those threats against people who are public servants and who are trying to provide basic services to our kids and families, that is also a form of toxicity that I think the exhausted voter, you know, black, white, and other, does. There's a resonance there as well.
But you know what? For Democrats to really fight that, they would have to be willing to say what you have said on your show. I think we've all said a version of it. You have to be willing to vocalize that these Republicans are dangerous, that this isn't a party that's just another political party that disagrees with us on tax policy, that at this point, they're dangerous. They're dangerous to our national security, because stoking that kind of soft white nationalism eventually leads to the hardcore stuff. It leads to the January 6th stuff, because if people are tolerant of it in your party, they're tolerant of the soft racism, it's a really short trip to get to the January 6th insurrectionist place.
Although
and
that's what McAuliffe has tried to do that, though.
He
I mean,
has,
by
yeah.
McAuliffe trying to hang Trump around Youngkin's neck and Youngkin, again, trying to do this arm's length thing. I mean, that's what McAuliffe has been trying to do.
And Obama did it very effectively. That was Obama's message, and it sort of set, I think that in a lot of ways was one of the more effective closing messages in the McAuliffe camp.
I think we have, I heard a little eep.
Yes.
And I think that means that we've got Steve eeped. Does that mean that we have some first data, Steve?
We have our first votes in, and I stress this is about 2,000 votes, but I just want to show you we now do have vote coming in a little bit after 10 minutes after 7 o'clock. What you're seeing here is from Chesterfield County. This is just a good opportunity, I think, to talk about the importance of this county, because this is going to be a big one tonight. We are in the suburbs of Richmond. We're just south of Richmond. This is McAuliffe, about 2,000 votes here, so this is very tight. You can't read anything into this small amount, but keep an eye on Chesterfield tonight, because let me show you the trend in Chesterfield. Joe Biden won this county by about 6.5 points last year. Again, this is one of those counties. Trump actually narrowly won it in 2016, and Romney in 2012 actually won this by 8 points. So this is one of those. It went from Romney by comfortable margin to Trump narrowly to a Democratic comfortable margin in 2020. This is a suburban county that's been migrating away from the Democrats, and that really took off in the Trump era. So Trump lost this. I think this is one of the counties tonight, the Youngkin folks, if they aren't winning Chesterfield back tonight, that's going to be a very bad sign for Youngkin's campaign. This is exactly the kind of place where his message around education was designed to resonate. This is exactly the kind of place when you just look at the suburban areas where the votes are in the suburbs, in the D.C. metro area, in the Richmond metro area. This is exactly the kind of place where you come looking for votes if you're Youngkin. So, again, this is just a sliver. And here we go. We're starting to get a little more lighting up here. This is an interesting county. Let's just zoom back out to statewide here. And again, we're just getting scattered amounts here. But this is Buchanan County here. This is fascinating. This is 57 votes. Again, this is a small county. It actually borders, you can see here, West Virginia and Kentucky, the only one in the state to do that. This has been a wild political journey for this county the other way. Take a look at what's been happening here over the last couple elections. Let's go back to 2012. You know, Mitt Romney was winning this by 34 points. At the end of the Trump presidency, Republicans were winning this by nearly 70 points. So again, I showed you an example with Allegheny County, another small county, but this is another one of these Southwest Virginia counties, small rural counties, where Trump really built up the Democratic margin. And the question coming into tonight, one of the questions had been, can Youngkin sustain Trump levels of support in Southwest Virginia? So again, Trump got 83.5% here last year, just a scattering of votes, and you see what Youngkin's at right now. As we get more in Buchanan County, let's take a look here. Is Youngkin running at that Trump level? That's something his campaign badly wants to see. Let's work our way up to Bath County here. And again, we're just getting a small scattering in, but the point I want to make here, again, we are in the heart of what was Trump country, what you would call Trump surge country in Virginia. It's a strongly Republican area that got much more Republican under Donald Trump. And so the question again for Youngkin, we'll see more votes obviously to come in Bath. Is he hitting that Trump number in this part of the state? Let's see what else is coming in. This looks like Culpeper starting to come in. Now, this is interesting because Culpeper, you're sort of one rung removed from the immediate Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. Culpeper's an interesting county. Again, take a look here. Trump won this thing by 20 points. This is one of those places where Youngkin really wants to expand on that Trump margin. So again, this is a small amount that's coming in right now in Culpeper County. And I'm actually just going to ask my producer, Adam, do we know, is this the same day? Are we getting same day vote in Culpeper? Right, okay, and that's the other key point to make here. So what you see here is the vote starting to come in Culpeper. You see Youngkin at nearly 80%. Trump got nearly 60% in here. What you're looking at right now, this 6% that started to come in, this is from, and this is another important thing to keep in mind as the votes come in tonight, there are different batches of votes that are going to behave very differently. So you've got the mail-in vote, the vote by mail ballots. That's going to be the most pro-McAuliffe, the most Democratic, the vote by mail. You've got the early vote. That's probably going to be pro-McAuliffe, but not as much as the mail. And then you've got the same-day vote, the people that went out today to the precincts and voted today. This 6% that you're seeing so far in Culpeper is from the same day. This is same-day vote. That's the most Republican-friendly. That's the most Youngkin-friendly. So, again, he wants to be running significantly ahead of Trump in that particular type of vote. When they all get added in and we get a final result in Culpeper tonight, if you're Youngkin, you probably want to be running above 65% in this county. So, again, you want to be running, if you're Youngkin, generally 5 points or more above Trump's performance in any given county. And this is the kind of county, there are some demographic ingredients here. If you're Youngkin, you probably want to do even a little bit better than that. So that's an example there in Culpeper. Let's see what else is starting to come in. Reset with the statewide total. So, again, it's skewed right now. It is that we talked about it. The traditional model in Virginia has been rural areas, Republican areas reporting first. In the first 7,000 or so votes we're getting statewide, that is the case. You're getting these more from Republicans. Here's another one. This is Richmond County, not the city of Richmond. Richmond County. Again, Donald Trump won this thing. He got 62% of the vote here last year. You're looking at same-day vote. If you're Youngkin, when everything gets added together here in Richmond tonight, you want to be at about 67% of the vote. So, again, this is the most pro-Youngkin. This is drawn from the most pro-Youngkin batch of votes you're going to get here. So let's see when everything eventually comes in Richmond County. Is Youngkin at about 67% or higher? That would be a target for his campaign. Again, just looking, we are in Southwest Virginia. We are in the heart of what was Trump surge territory in the state of Virginia. You can see Trump got nearly 80% of the vote here. Again, we are looking at, in fact, we can see here, I believe we can put this up on the screen, and if I was going to try to show you. It's okay. That is election day vote. I thought we had a fancy way of illustrating that to you, but that is the same thing I'm talking about, where it's the election day vote that's the most Republican. So again, right now we're getting some of the election day vote in. This is Southwest Virginia. This is the heart of this Trump surge area in Virginia. And again, when this number comes down to, when everything gets factored in here in a place like Wythe County tonight, again, if you're Youngkin and the Republicans, you want to be meeting that Trump number, what Trump was able to roll up there last year. Just take a look here. We have Brunswick County. Okay, now this is interesting. We're getting into if you get into sort of South Side Virginia here, you come west a little bit of the fall line, get into South Side Virginia. This is where there's a larger African-American population. So you can see in Brunswick County, Joe Biden actually won this county. This is rural, large African-American population. Joe Biden won here by 15 points. Again, getting a few of the same-day votes in here. But this is one of those tests we're going to be looking at tonight. We talk about the importance of the black vote to Democrats. This is the kind of county, if you're McAuliffe, you want to be matching that Biden number. You want to be getting close to that Biden number if you can. This is the kind of place where if you can really excite, energize African-American support, you could do well here. So let's see how this one, again, just talking about a small number of votes here. The idea right now is more to get a lay of the land. Looks like Radford is giving us something. Radford University is here. This is the city of Radford. Again, this is an area that Donald Trump was more competitive in when it comes to cities. He didn't actually win it, came within 9 points, but you're looking at same-day vote in the city of Radford. Again, when you factor in ultimately the mail-in ballots, the early voting that'll be more Democratic, if you're Youngkin, I think you want to be winning Radford at the end of the night. You want to get a win here. Trump got 44. You want to be over 50. We'll see how things shake out when we get all the vote in there. We're just getting a scattering in a lot of these places right now. I'm just seeing if anything else has come in. Doesn't look like it has. There is one more there in Wise. We've actually got, I'm sorry, this is tiny, but this is the first county where it looks like we've got the vote in. So I do just want to show you. Far Southwest Virginia, remember what we say, Trump surge. And question is, can Youngkin hit the Trump number in Little Wise County? Although that 99% doesn't seem, I want to check if that's a computational error. There should be more votes than that. So let's check on that. But let's look at the statewide result right now. Again, Youngkin, mostly small rural counties, mostly same-day vote that's coming in. Those are some of the trends we're going to look for as this map continues to fill out. And I got to say, I talked to the election officials in the big counties in Virginia. Some of them were emphatic that they were going to have their early vote out, their mail vote out, even potentially in this first 15, 20 minutes. Not the first time we've gotten a promise like that from election officials that hasn't exactly panned out.
Steve, can I ask just one clarifying question?
Yes.
You're talking about how counties are reporting different types of votes. Is every county going to be explicit about which type of vote they are announcing? With every county, will we be able to disambiguate that in terms of early vote, same-day vote, and all the rest?
Yeah, and I was hoping that unfortunately, we had a little thing set up here that was designed to display that for you. Sounds like there's a glitch with it, so hopefully I'll be able to display that on air. But the big change that was made in Virginia after 2020 was they asked every county, the state told every county, we want you basically to organize your vote so that you are explicitly reporting out the mail vote. They're going to assign a precinct to report the mail vote, to report the early vote, to report the same-day vote by precinct. So they all should be separated in every county. The state, going through the state's website, you should be getting it that way, and we are getting it that way now. So yes, we didn't have a record of that in 2020. They didn't report it out that specifically. We only have estimates here of how that vote might have broken out in 2020. Tonight, we're going to have exact numbers. We're also getting a ton in all of a sudden. Let's just take a look here. We've suddenly got over 100,000 votes in statewide. Now you see that count has tightened a little bit. Couple things that have just come in. Let's take a look right outside of Washington, D.C. This is the core, one of the core Democratic counties in the state. This is Arlington County. It's geographically small, but this produces, Joe Biden got 80.6% of the vote here last year. And I'm just going to see if, since this isn't quite functional yet, Adam, do you know what type of vote we're looking at in Arlington County here? This is key. This looks like we're getting the early vote reported out in Arlington County. And now I do have a point of comparison here for 2020. The absentee early vote, and I'm just trying to call it up here. Okay. It was 85% for Joe Biden. The early absentee vote in 2020 was 85%. And it looks like McAuliffe is running just a couple points behind that. So again, there was a 10-point cushion in this state for Democrats. Biden beat Trump by 10 points. McAuliffe can afford some slippage tonight from where Trump ran in this state. So if in Arlington County he ends up 2 or 3 points behind where Joe Biden ran, that would be good news for Terry McAuliffe. So again, we've got same-day vote. We've got more vote to come in Arlington County. But this is just one of those core vote-producing areas for Democrats. This is the city of Fairfax. This is interesting. Fairfax County, which is this area right here that's all in gray that you see, inside Fairfax County is Fairfax City. Now, Fairfax City is much, much smaller than Fairfax County. They do tend to vote similarly. The result in Fairfax City in 2020 was similar to Fairfax County. So what I'm going to show you here is the 2020 result in Fairfax City. Biden won this thing 68-30, basically, over Trump. We showed you Fairfax County was almost 70% for Joe Biden. Let's pay attention if we end up getting Fairfax City before Fairfax County. You want to see how far under that number is. If McAuliffe falls more than 5 points or so behind the number in a place like this, that would not portend well for him in some of these other areas of northern Virginia, areas that Youngkin has targeted to try to make inroads. So let's keep an eye as we get more in here in Fairfax City. Looks like we've got a lot to Prince William. We've got just a small amount coming in. This is another one of these big, densely populated, right outside Washington, D.C. counties. Joe Biden was winning here, with about 63% of the vote in 2020. Take a look at Manassas, which is inside of the county. They've got these independent cities. Take a look at Manassas in 2020. Biden was at 61%. McAuliffe right now, with what we have, is running at 62%. Just take a look, reset to the same day. Youngkin continuing to lead. The big, as I say, the big mother lode of votes here in Northern Virginia is Fairfax. We don't have anything from there yet. Loudoun County's right next door. We don't have anything from there yet. And we have a little bit around the Richmond suburbs. So just keep watching here as this comes in.
All right, we're going to step away just for a second as this vote is starting to sort of pour in to give Steve a chance to catch up with what is coming in. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back right on the other side of this. Stay with us. Welcome back to our election night coverage here on MSNBC. We are closely watching the first returns come in the very, very tight Virginia governor's race. I say it's tight because the polls were tighter than a tick heading into polls closing tonight just about a half an hour ago. Since then, the race is too early to call, but we are still seeing significant numbers of results coming in from counties across the state. I will tell you that one very, very closely watched Democratic-leaning county in the northern part of the state of Virginia has made some news. This is the New York Times reporting. NBC News has not confirmed this, but Reed Epstein at the New York Times is reporting that Fairfax County in northern Virginia is delayed in reporting its early vote ballots. Now, we don't know when. We are expecting those ballots to be counted, but it will not be by the self-imposed 8 p.m. deadline. We've been talking about this a little bit with Steve Kornacki over the course of the evening thus far, that some of the voting reforms passed in Virginia over the past couple of years directed localities to start pre-processing early votes 7 days before Election Day, meaning, they've had 6 or 7 weeks of early voting in Virginia already. 7 days before tonight, a week ago, counties could start pre-processing those ballots. And a lot of counties sort of predicted, promised that would mean that they'd be able to report a significant number of those early votes right when the polls closed. If this New York Times reporting is borne out this evening, Fairfax County will not be among the counties that is reporting its early vote right away. We don't know the reason for the delay, but Fairfax County is a bank for Democratic voters. And so this will be significant in terms of the way the contours of the race unfold over the course of the evening. All right, back to Steve Kornacki, whose board is lighting up over there. We are still too early to call statewide, but Steve, what are we learning?
We are, and so we are starting to get, as you can see, some very significant vote here. This is 2021. Here we go. This is the lieutenant governor. Here we go. 2020. I am sorry, this board has been acting up like crazy here. This is what I was trying to get for you. Glenn Youngkin leading in this sort of scattered vote that we have right now. As you mentioned, Fairfax County, we thought we would be getting a ton there early. We're getting nothing. We are getting a chunk here next door in Loudoun County. And we've talked so much about Loudoun County, D.C. metro area, the area here where Joe Biden really surged in 2020, where Democrats have had such great success during the Trump presidency. How much could Youngkin improve? And let's show you here how much in a place like Loudoun County, with that message on education, could Glenn Youngkin improve over Donald Trump? So you see almost half the vote right now is in Loudoun County, and you see Youngkin is running at 45%. Now, I'm just going to use my little cheat sheet here because I think what we're looking at here is a fair amount of the early and the absentee vote in Loudoun County. And I'm just looking back here and see if we can grab this here. So it looks like, yeah, we've got about 85,000 left to come here in Loudoun County. The question here, there still is more early absentee, I believe, to come. So the question here, for Loudoun is, can he sustain this level of support in Loudoun County as the rest of the vote comes in here? Because this is absolutely about 45%. If Youngkin were able to walk away tonight in a place like Loudoun with 45%, that's definitely meeting and exceeding their goals, the Republicans' goals, in a place like that. The goal is not to win a county like Loudoun County. The goal is to erase as much of that Trump deficit as you can. If you can take a 25-point loss for Donald Trump and you can cut it down to about 10 points, you're putting yourself in a much better position than to rack up votes in core Republican areas and to make it a game statewide. So let's see as the rest of the vote comes in there. We've got a little bit less than half in Loudoun County. Let's see if Youngkin can sustain that and stay within about 10 points of Terry McAuliffe. That would be a significant development for him because, again, we're just starting to get vote in here. Prince William County, again, this is about the same size as Loudoun County. You're just outside of Washington, D.C. here. This also a core Biden county, last year. That's a much smaller share of the vote here. So again, we just want to see as we get more vote, more different types of vote here. But again, for Youngkin, can he crack 40%, get into the low 40s, 42, 43%? Can he get somewhere around there in a Prince William County when all the votes are counted tonight? Just taking a look here, what else might be coming in? This looks like we're getting Montgomery County, and I wanted to check in. This is where Virginia Tech is. This is one of the bigger counties, about 100,000 people here in Southwest Virginia, actually a county that Joe Biden won. We don't have many votes there. I just saw it light up, so I wanted to see what was going on. We're also just getting, this is right around Charlottesville, Albemarle County. Charlottesville is that little independent city in the middle. Again, I was just seeing if we were getting some significant vote there. We are not. A lot of just very small reports coming in. Going to check one more that I see. This is a little more significant. Just take you through quickly. This is Richmond suburbs, just north of Richmond. This is Henrico County. This is one of those places. Let's put it up. In 2020 in Henrico County, Joe Biden cleaned Donald Trump's clock here. He won by nearly 30 points. This has been a Democratic county for some time, Henrico County. This is a big one. There's more than 300,000 people who live here. This has been a Democratic county for some time. But if you went back to 2012, that's the last time Republicans fielded a presidential candidate who wasn't Donald Trump. Republicans only lost here by 12 points. So that you see how much ground they lost under Donald Trump in Henrico County. Romney lost by 12. Here's Trump losing by nearly 30. And again, we're only getting about a quarter of the vote in here right now. But if you're Glenn Youngkin, can you get anywhere near? If you could cut that 30 in half, if you could cut it down to 15, that would be terrific news if you're Glenn Youngkin, if you're a Republican. But again, I believe we've still got mail vote to come here in Henrico County. That McAuliffe number can go up. But just keep that in mind as you look at the numbers and you look at the rest of the vote come in Henrico County. Is Youngkin above 40? Is he starting to get significantly above 40? The more he can get above 40 in a place like Henrico County, when everything is tallied up and all those different vote types kind of balance each other out, that's a good night for him if he can get a couple points over 40 there. So again, let's just check in what's coming in so far. You see the statewide total. As you said, we got nothing from Fairfax County. That's the mother lode. 1 out of every 7 votes in Virginia tonight is going to come out of that county. I'll light it up for you. Fairfax County, we've got nothing from there so far. Core Democratic county. You're starting to see Trump country down here in Southwest Virginia. That's starting to fill in here. A lot of other kind of Trump-friendly rural counties here lighting up red again tonight. That's why Youngkin's out to this lead. But it still is very much a scattering of votes here we're looking for, and we don't really have yet completed counties where we can really give you a comparison to 2020, but giving you a sense here of what we're looking for in some of these key places as the vote fills in. And I just see Virginia Beach. We're starting to get some, as I said at the top, Virginia Beach, this is the closest thing there is in Virginia, I think, to a bellwether county or a bellwether city tonight. Again, small amount of the vote in right now. Here's Glenn Youngkin up 20 with the tally we have. This is a city that Joe Biden won by more than 5 points. It's a city that Biden flipped from Donald Trump. It's a city with a Republican history. There's about 450,000 people here. This is the biggest city in Virginia. Glenn Youngkin, this is one he wants to win. This is one he wants to get up probably to 52% or so tonight. That's probably the Youngkin campaign's goal in Virginia Beach. Win it and get a little bit of a pad in Virginia Beach. So small amount in right now. This looks like same-day vote, Youngkin-friendly vote. Let's see when everything gets factored in Virginia Beach by the end of tonight. Can he keep that above 50? Can he keep that a few points above 50? It's a similar story right next door. This is the city of Chesapeake. This is another biggie. There's a couple 100,000 people in Chesapeake. Very similar to Virginia Beach. It was won by Joe Biden in 2020. After going for Donald Trump in 2016. Again, Youngkin, when you get to the end of the night, is he 52, 53%? Can he get somewhere up there in the city of Chesapeake? Only, again, a scattering of vote there right now. So I'm just surveying the board here. Again, we're at 14% or so in statewide. There's a lot of scattered precincts reporting out their same-day vote. As we said, where you're seeing same-day vote anywhere, that's the most Youngkin-friendly type of vote. So you're getting a lot of same-day vote right now. A lot of it is from Republican-friendly areas, so no surprise, Youngkin is leading the statewide tally. Still, obviously, some big areas here where there's nothing or very little from, and just keeping an eye on this,
and
see some changes.
Steve, just to sort of bring together all these things that you're saying, it seems to me like if I had a choice right now behind the veil of ignorance to be either Terry McAuliffe or Glenn Youngkin, I'd rather be Glenn Youngkin. I mean, although nothing is determinative, nothing is defined, nothing is decided, it's all still too early to call. From the numbers that we're seeing here, none of these numbers are bad numbers for Youngkin yet.
However, as I say, a lot of this is same-day vote. And I can't emphasize enough the difference here between how the same-day vote goes. It's the most pro-Republican you're going to see. I'll just give you a couple examples here from 2020, how this played out. Let's just take Fairfax County, the big one that we're all waiting on here. So in Fairfax County, and again, remember, in 2020, they didn't officially report this out by method, but here's what we can glean from the results in 2020 in Fairfax County. And I just want to take one look here to make sure I got this right. In the absentee vote in Fairfax County, that is to say, the mail vote plus the in-person early vote in Fairfax County in 2020. Joe Biden won that type of vote by 57 points. That's a 7 right there, won by 57 points. In the same day, the election day vote in Fairfax County, that was won by Joe Biden by 7 points.
Wow.
So a 50-point difference. Again, we saw this in so many states in 2020. There really is, in this era of mail voting and early vote, different methods, different modes of voting, there really is a strong preference Democrats seem to have, we see it in many states, to vote by mail. Republicans seem to have a much stronger preference, for whatever reason, to vote on Election Day. So it's so critical here, and it looks like we got some Fairfax in. It's so critical here to see the type of vote, and it looks like, so, okay, here we go. We just got, as I was speaking, in Fairfax County, it looks like a third of the vote came in here in Fairfax. This is 74% for McAuliffe, and I just want to see, right, this is, and let me see if we actually were able to break this out by type. I just want to see this thing has been funky tonight. It's not actually working the way I hoped it would, but you can definitely see, let's see if I can get back to this, you can definitely see at 74%, that's in line with what I was just telling you. Remember, Trump won the absentee vote in this county by 57 points last time around. Here, the difference is about 48. Okay, Youngkin is within 48 right now. Trump lost by 57. I believe what you're seeing here is just the early vote. There is still, just based on the numbers that we have here, there's still a chunk of mail-in votes that need to come in here to fill out the absentee. So what I expect would happen is, I believe this is the early vote. There's a smaller chunk of mail-in votes that you would need to also add into this that, again, Fairfax told us they'd report early. Let's see if they do. So when you add that in, this McAuliffe number would go up, I believe. Then you would have all of your absentee vote, and then it's just a question of the same-day vote, which will be more Youngkin-friendly. So, again, to answer your question, it's a long way of saying, I know I'm throwing all sorts of numbers and all sorts of terms out here, but to answer your question, Rachel, when I'm looking at these numbers right now, it's not at all clear to me, despite the fact that, you know, McAuliffe's running at 73.7 here right now. It's not at all clear to me that Youngkin is in any better shape than Trump was in a place like Fairfax or statewide, because we got to see some completed counties here.
Steve,
there's just too much of a range.
I'm sorry, I never want to interrupt you, but let me just say that the decision desk has just changed its characterization of this race, which is an important change. It was too early to call. It is now considered to be too close to call. With that tranche of vote that we just got in from Fairfax County, which Steve was just going through, you will note overall that it's changed back again, actually. Youngkin had been ahead overall in Virginia in terms of the amount of vote that we had in. Then McAuliffe had shifted to being ahead when we got that first tranche of vote in from Fairfax County. Now, with 25% of the vote in, Youngkin appears to be back out ahead in the lead. But the characterization of this race at the decision desk has changed from too early to too close. We're going to give Steve a chance to catch up here for a second. I want to go quickly to our beloved colleague, Claire McCaskill, former Democratic senator from Missouri. Claire, I know you've been making calls and hearing from some people inside at least the McAuliffe campaign in terms of how they're feeling and what they think about the turnout.
They thought the turnout was strong. There was, a few 100,000 people that voted early in 2017. They had over 1 million that voted early in this election. Although it does look like they're going to end up with north of 3 million voters total, so that 2/3 of the vote will be Election Day vote. And, you know, watching this map, Rachel, I got to say, it's just a thing that played in my head over and over again in rural Missouri. Margins matter. In areas that you don't win. How badly you lose makes a real difference. There's no question these culture wars have really worked in Southwest Virginia. And those numbers down there are pretty bleak. And they're little counties, but they add up when the margins are so great. And make no mistake, McAuliffe is trying to fight history here, because even when Obama won big in 2008, a Republican got elected governor in Virginia the next year.
That's right. And that's been the pattern in Virginia all the way back to the 1970s. Every time we've had a newly elected president, the party from the other party's gubernatorial candidate wins in Virginia the following year. Claire, we'll be back with you in just a moment. I know that Steve has just gotten in some, I think, completed vote counts from certain counties, Steve?
Yeah, and this is the key, because like we're saying, there's just these different types of vote, and you're only getting partial in each county. So we can't really start to get a picture of this until we get completed counties, and we can say, how does that compare to last time around? What has changed? So we are starting to get a few, and let me show you what we got. I introduced this one at the start of the night. Very small, but we're not completed here. I'm sorry. I thought I was told we were completed here. Let me take a look. Bland County, we are, it looks like, completed. And so, again, this is a very similar story to what I'm talking about. Very small, rural, Southwest Virginia area where Donald Trump really drove that Republican number up. Question coming into tonight for Glenn Youngkin: could he be reaching the Trump level of support in this region? You could see certainly one county we're getting in here. Youngkin has matched and slightly even exceeded the Trump number here. So, again, there's a lot of small counties like this all throughout Southwest Virginia, in the Shenandoah Valley. Let's see if this is replicated elsewhere, but that's what you want to see in a place like that if you're Glenn Youngkin. We also mentioned this one earlier, Brunswick County, and again, you're getting just a little bit, west of the fall line here. This looks like it's completed too. Terry McAuliffe winning this by about 5 points over Glenn Youngkin. Again, we put this up a minute ago. Compare that to 2020. That's a drop of 5 points, McAuliffe versus Biden. Again, there's a large African-American population right here. If you're McAuliffe, you can probably afford statewide about 5 points of slippage, give or take, from Joe Biden's 2020 number. Remember, Joe Biden 54, Donald Trump 44. So you could probably lose about 5 points and still potentially eke out a victory. This is, if you're the McAuliffe campaign, this is right on the line of what you want to be seeing. You don't want to see any worse than this. You could potentially get by with getting 52% in a Brunswick County. I also believe now getting into Northern Virginia here, this is the city of Manassas, and it looks like we've got completed vote in Manassas. Again, Northern Virginia, core Democratic area. And you see here, Terry McAuliffe, 50, this is a 10-point margin, basically round it to 55, 45. And here you go. Biden's, this is slippage now of a little bit more than 6 points. This is about 6.5 point slippage for McAuliffe relative to the Biden number. So this is, these numbers can vary by county. If you're McAuliffe, you can get by if you can make up for it in some places with a number like this. But this is not a great number in this one place if you're Terry McAuliffe. Again, let's see if that's replicated elsewhere. But again, if you're Youngkin, you want to be gaining 5 or 6 points over Trump in Northern Virginia. So that's a small independent city that's within Prince William County. We want to see it. I'm just seeing if we've got any more that's come in the big ones here. We've got a bunch now in Loudoun County. Check this out. So looks like about 3/4, a little bit more than 3/4 of the vote is in Loudoun County right now. I'm tempting fate by pressing this, but let me see if I've got our breakdown here. We've got the, and let me just confirm this. Adam, is this correct? This is the, it's, okay, we got to confirm the vote type. We've had all sorts of glitches with that tonight. I can tell you this, though, this is about 3/4 of the vote in Loudoun County that's in right now. Again, this is a large county. We're talking more than 400,000 people, and this is the point of comparison for Loudoun County. Biden by 25 last time around. Youngkin made this, his last rally last night was held in Loudoun County. He believed the issue of education would resonate for him very acutely in Loudoun County. If he could finish anywhere near this would be a massive, massive positive sign for Youngkin. The question is, and this is what we're trying to get clarity on, that outstanding 23% of the vote in Loudoun County. The vote still to come. What type of vote are we looking at? If it's the mail vote, if that's the missing piece of this, the vote by mail, as I've told you, that's the most pro-McAuliffe, most pro-Democratic. The mail vote tends to be dramatically Democratic. If it's the mail vote, this McAuliffe number could still come up significantly, and this could look like a very different story than it does right now. So we're trying to find out exactly what's missing in Loudoun County, but we are now at more than 3/4 of the vote. It's a critical question what type of vote remains in Loudoun County, because, again, if Youngkin is able to finish anywhere near where he is right now in Loudoun County, boy, that is more than his campaign was hoping for in this county. But again, if that were to get knocked down 3 or 4 points here, it'd be much more in line with what the McAuliffe campaign was hoping for. So we're going to try to get clarity on that, and we'll see if we've got 3/4 in. We'll see if we can get completed vote there shortly. So again, just reset statewide a little bit more than 1/4 of the vote. That's what you're looking at.
All right. While we watch those additional results come in, I want to bring in Senator Mark Warner, former U.S. Senator from Virginia, former Virginia governor. Senator Warner, it's a real pleasure to have you with us tonight. Thanks very much for being here.
Well, thank you, Rachel. It's another exciting night in Virginia.
So it is always an exciting night in Virginia, and the whole country is always watching in these off-year elections because Virginia sort of stands alone, at least alongside New Jersey, in terms of having one of these big statewide races. I know that you're at McAuliffe headquarters tonight and that you're watching these things come in as we do. How confident are you that your colleague, Mr. McAuliffe, is going to be able to pull this out tonight? It looks like it's going to be very, very close if he does.
Well, it's going to be close. I felt very good about the fact that we got our early vote up to 1.2 million votes beforehand. That's probably going to break almost 60-40 for Terry. That's one of those things, expanding voting rights, that frankly could be in jeopardy if his opponent is successful. And I just point out to our viewers, you know, we report kind of strangely in Virginia. Last year, when I won the state, ran ahead of President Biden, won it by over 500,000 votes. It wasn't until about 10:30 that I actually went ahead. So I would say to your viewers, particularly those who want, you know, Terry to win, you know, chill out a little bit, grab a beer, get a pizza, whatever is your beverage or food of choice on an election night, and settle in, because we're probably going to have a long evening.
I wholeheartedly endorse the beer and pizza prescription for everybody who's watching. But Senator, do you think that the Beltway press has been right to look at this race as a referendum on national politics, as a referendum on President Biden, on a referendum as to how you and your Democratic colleagues are doing in terms of holding governing majorities in Washington? Is this a race that we should extrapolate to some national narratives, or is this something that is really specific to Virginia?
Well, Rachel, are you suggesting that maybe the national press time sometimes overstates the case? I say it a little bit glibly because clearly, you know, there's gambling in this establishment. But I think, you know, candidly, as somebody who wants the president to succeed, I wish we would have passed the infrastructure deal 2 months ago. That would have given the president a big win, and I think would have helped here in Virginia. That being said, we're going to get them both done. We're going to get infrastructure done, I hope, this week. I even think my friend Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, we're going to get the second half that deals with child care, climate issues, lowering the price of prescription drugs, and actually doing it in a way that makes the tax code fairer. I'm up to my eyeballs in the details on that. We're going to get that done as well. Timing-wise, yes, if we had gotten infrastructure done earlier, we got it done in the Senate in July. I wish it would have been done earlier, but we are where we are.
Senator Mark Warner of Virginia joining us tonight from McAuliffe headquarters, where everybody is watching each of these results as they come in one by one. Sir, thank you for your time tonight. I really appreciate you making the time.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Appreciate it.
All right, we are still in the thick of this as these results are coming in. We are going to take a quick break here, but I can tell you that when we come back, we've got a poll closing in New Jersey, which is the other governor's race. Tonight, polls close in New Jersey just about 5 minutes from now. We'll have those results as soon as they come in, as well as this too close to call race in Virginia. We'll be watching it till the cows come home. Stay with us. Welcome back to our special election night coverage here on MSNBC. We do have a call. This is a congressional election in Ohio. This is a Cleveland area district, a very blue district. This was opened up by Marcia Fudge being confirmed to President Biden's cabinet as HUD secretary tonight. Democrat Shontel Brown has beaten the Republican candidate Laverne Gore. Again, NBC News just making that projection in Ohio's 11th congressional district. Congratulations to the Congresswoman-elect Shontel Brown in Ohio. I can also tell you that in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 seconds from now, New Jersey's polls have closed. The governor's race in New Jersey, one of 2 governor's races that we are covering tonight. It is Democrat Phil Murphy trying to be reelected. He is up against a Republican challenger named Jack Ciattarelli. At this point, NBC News projects that this race is too early to call, but we will be watching closely as the first results start to come in New Jersey now that those polls have closed in the Garden State. Also at this hour, polls have just closed moments ago in the great American city of Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta will be electing a new mayor tonight under somewhat unusual circumstances. The current mayor of Atlanta is the very high-profile, very charismatic mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, long been considered a rising star in the Democratic Party. She was considered as a potential running mate for President Biden in his presidential aspirations. But earlier this year, Keisha Lance Bottoms made a shock announcement that she would not seek re-election as Atlanta's mayor at the end of this term. So she is leaving that seat. There are 14 candidates on the ballot in Atlanta tonight running to succeed her. In order to win, a candidate needs to get 50% of the vote. And while that seems a reasonable thing in most elections, when you're running against 13 other people, that's almost mathematically impossible. If, in fact, that is the way this shakes out tonight, if none of these 14 candidates get to 50%, the top 2 performing candidates in Atlanta will go on to a runoff election, and that will happen on November 30th. But again, polls have just closed in Atlanta. And at this point, we are, of course, still watching Virginia. In Virginia, the polls closed 1 hour and 1 minute ago. NBC News currently projects that race as too close to call. With 35% of the vote in right now, you see Glenn Youngkin, the Republican candidate, Trump-endorsed candidate, at 54%, Terry McAuliffe at 45%. But we're continuing to watch those vote totals come in. I am here in our New York City studios with Joy Reid and Nicole Wallace, absorbing what we've seen come in over the course of the last hour. I feel like in the Virginia governor's race, I would rather be Glenn Youngkin than I would be Terry McAuliffe. But our main margin here, our main metric here, is that we're comparing McAuliffe to how Joe Biden did last year. Joe Biden did very well in Virginia. He won by 10 points. Terry McAuliffe doesn't need to win by 10 points. He only needs to win by 1 vote. Right. How are you guys feeling looking at this? Does it strike you the same way it strikes me?
No, you know what? I'm old enough to remember, and you are probably old enough to remember, I'm not going to age any of us, when it used to be that the absentee ballot...
I was thinking
that the absentee vote was Republican.
Yeah.
It's so weird to me still to hear Steve Kornacki say that mail-in vote is overwhelmingly Democratic. That is a complete and upside-down shift in the way elections have always been. Democratic voters were same-day voters. They were day-of-election voters, and then they became early voters. But Republicans owned absentee. And I wonder long-term, depending on how this goes for Youngkin, how the Republican Party is going to feel about giving away absentee, which going forward is going to become more and more the way that modern elections happen because it's more convenient. And if they've just given this to Democrats as a thing.
Well, it's also, let's say we're going to have 3 million people vote in Virginia. I'm just picking a number out of a hat. Over 1 million people are going to be, will have voted by mail, will have done it this way. And so what'll be interesting to see is not only how campaigning changes, because you can't count on any one category of ballot leaning any one way in partisan terms, but it may also be that we're looking at higher turnout. In every state, in every election from here on out, because we have made voting easier by allowing people to vote more easily by mail.
So that's the cause. The effect is 400 voter suppression bills tearing 48 states. Yeah. The voter suppression bills are targeted at exactly this. What you said started. There are prominent national consultants who rose to fame, in some cases infamy, in the GOP for being so good at turning out the mail vote. Yes. I mean, there are prominent consultants who became Svengalis because they could turn out GOP mail vote. It is now, along with same-day, drive-through voting, which is one of the most secure forms of voting, it is on the chopping block. It is at the top of the list for the things that Republicans want to outlaw. So I think every time we talk about these three categories, two of them are in grave jeopardy around the country.
And can we talk about Virginia just as a state that's one of the easiest states in the country to vote in? They've really done a good job of liberalizing, small L, liberalizing the access to the ballot. And Terry McAuliffe, when he was governor, did something that's really important, was that former felons, people who'd served their time, he took them off of that Jim Crow list of states where they couldn't vote. So he's made it easier to vote in so many different ways between Northam and Terry McAuliffe. If Youngkin is the one who benefits from that, it'll be a weird thing.
So, I mean, in pure absolute value civic terms, more people voting is a good thing. More people voting, having their votes counted, finding it easy to vote, not having those barriers to vote, that's a good thing. The consultants are going to have to change their game.
And hopefully won't switch it
to not be able to count it.
Exactly.
To not be able to count on it being a partisan contour to any one form of voting. But while we've been talking about this, Steve has been eeping. Steve, am I right to say that we are getting in, it looks like the vote's coming in somewhat faster now?
Yeah, now, so we are up to about 40%, a little bit more than 40% statewide. And again, we talked at the start of the night, we were wondering if that traditional model of the Republicans building a big lead in the vote tally and then the Democrats trying to reverse it late with a lot of vote in Northern Virginia was going to change. That is the pattern that's shaping up here again. The old patterns prevailing. The Republican Glenn Youngkin, we're getting a lot of the, as you can see on this map, we're getting a lot of the rural areas, a lot of the Republican-friendly parts of the state in right now. Youngkin is building a substantial lead statewide. It is certainly going to shrink, and I'd say shrink very significantly because there's a lot still out here in Northern Virginia. So let me take you through two ways of looking at this, because really what is shaping up right now is two kind of key questions. Number one is, outside of the immediate suburbs of Washington, D.C., the suburbs of Richmond, outside of that, more strongly Republican counties, can Youngkin match or exceed Donald Trump's numbers? We are starting to get more complete counties that fit that pattern. So take a look at like Louisa County here. We're not too far from Charlottesville here. We're basically all complete. And here's Youngkin by 30 points. Let's compare that to how Donald Trump did last year. Trump won here by 23. So this is an improvement. Youngkin's running a little bit less than 5 points better than Trump. He's increased the margin. That's a decent sign for Glenn Youngkin's campaign. They want to see this all over the place. They want to be driving up that number. We've got pretty much all the vote in. When you see 95% tonight, that at this point means pretty close to 100. And you can see here in Culpeper, pretty close to all the vote is in right now. Provisionals, would still come in, but you can see Trump 59% here last time around. Here's Glenn Youngkin. He's definitely jumped that number up, about 67% of the vote right there. So again, that's, if you're the Youngkin campaign, that's what you want to be seeing. You're talking about Bath County, one of those very small counties, but again, one of those areas where Trump really did well for the Republican Party, and here's Youngkin running better. So when I say two things are shaping up, one is the types of counties I'm just showing you right now. One of the questions coming into tonight was, would Youngkin be able to hit and then build on the Trump levels? We're starting to see a pattern here, as you could just see, that that Youngkin seems to be doing that. So then the second question becomes, and this is, I think, going to be the question that defines the rest of this night here, can McAuliffe answer in the key and in the core Democratic areas? So we've been talking about Northern Virginia here. Let's zoom in a little bit more. And again, this is the big one, Fairfax, where we got a big batch of vote probably about 20, 30 minutes ago. We haven't had anything since. There's more than 1 million people here. So this is by far the biggest. This may take a while now, given some of the reporting we're getting. So let's look next door to Loudoun County. And Loudoun County, we were talking about a few minutes ago. This is a real big question mark right now. About 82% of the vote is in, and you can see Terry McAuliffe is leading by 5.5 points. Again, if you compare this to 2020, holy cow, if you're Glenn Youngkin, you love these numbers. We now have a sense, though, of what is remaining, the vote, the exact type of vote that's remaining in Loudoun County. So I can tell you they have not yet counted the mail-in vote in Loudoun County. There are about 16,000 mail-in ballots to be counted in Loudoun County. You expect those to go overwhelmingly for McAuliffe. I mean, you're talking like 80% of the vote, something like that, maybe even more. That's just the pattern we see with mail-in ballots. So there's an opportunity there for McAuliffe with the mail votes to drive the number up. We are still also waiting in Loudoun County. We have a good chunk of the vote that was cast today, the same-day vote. That's the more Republican-friendly vote. There is still some more same-day vote to come as well. And also, there may be a sliver, a smaller amount of early vote. But really, there is a McAuliffe-friendly mail vote still to come here. There's still some Youngkin-friendly same-day vote, too. And it's just shaping up as a key question here. I think this number should move more in McAuliffe's direction when it gets up to 100%. But the question is, how much? What does the margin land at here? Trump won the county by 25 points. Is McAuliffe ultimately able to get this up to a 10-point victory in Loudoun County? Is this single digits? This is a key question, and it's a key question, obviously, because Loudoun itself is important. But again, we are waiting on Fairfax County next door, where we've got the early vote here so far, and we're still waiting on mail. We're still waiting on same-day vote. We've got those reports that it may take a while. We've seen this in Fairfax County in past elections where they kept us waiting all night. We may be waiting all night on Fairfax County again. Whenever we get all of the votes finally reported out in Fairfax County, it's going to be a big plurality for Terry McAuliffe, and that by itself would go a long way into eating this. So Youngkin is getting what he wants to in the Republican areas. Can McAuliffe answer in what have been the core Democratic areas?
Steve, I want to ask you to switch gears on the fly, if I can. Sorry. Do you know if we have any results in New Jersey yet? We've just had the governor's race. The polls closed in that governor's race just 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, here we go. We've got a chunk of the vote here in Gloucester County. This is just south of Camden. You're talking about South Jersey here. And again, I think what you're looking at here is they now have mail-in voting in New Jersey. And again, we talk about the mail ballots, the vote by mail being the most Democratic friendly. So I think we've got the mail vote in one county in New Jersey. You see Murphy, this was a 50-48 Biden county. Trump actually did fairly well in this part of South Jersey in 2020. The mail vote, very Democratic friendly. You see Murphy out to 68%. Again, we'll see that should come down some as the same day comes in. But obviously, if you're Chitterelli, you need to be improving substantially. In every county we look at in New Jersey tonight, if you're Chitterelli, you don't want to be getting, when we take a look back here at Gloucester County, you don't want to be hitting 48% when the night ends in Gloucester County. I mean, you want to be adding, 55, 60%. You want to be somewhere up there in a place like Gloucester County. We're also getting a chunk here in Essex County. This is the biggest Democratic vote-producing county in New Jersey. This is where the city of Newark is, Newark and its immediate suburbs. You can see here what Biden did, a 56-point victory last time out. Just a scattering of votes here, about 15,000 so far in Essex. Murphy doing what you would expect a Democrat to do in Essex County. Again, tonight, we want to see Monmouth County. We want to take a look at Monmouth County when it comes in. We want to take a look at Somerset County, Morris County. These are sort of suburban counties in New Jersey that have really moved, especially in the age of Trump, dramatically away from the Republicans. We want to see if Chitterelli can make massive inroads there. He would need to, because, again, this state was so strongly for Biden in 2020. It's a lot for Chitterelli to pull out. Just a small amount of vote in so far, though.
I want to bring into our conversation our friends, our political analysts, Claire McCaskill, former Democratic senator from Missouri, David Plouffe, campaign manager for President Obama in 2008, and Julian Castro, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, San Antonio mayor and presidential candidate. I start with you, David Plouffe, and something you said on my program a couple hours ago. Your break glass number in Loudoun. How are you feeling about the glass breaking right now?
Not very good in Loudoun. That's probably the darkest part of the map. So, it's 150,000 votes now that McAuliffe's down, and clearly that margin's going to narrow, and I think he's going to pick up a lot of vote in Arlington. He's going to pick up a lot of vote in Fairfax. But even if he dominates the rest of the vote, 80-20 if it's mail vote, he's still going to be south of 20%. And so that's deeply concerning. And I think that Loudoun's been on a journey. I remember when we won it for the first time, it seemed historic. It had been so long time as a Democrat. And then Biden won it, by I think 25 points. So that's the thing that concerns me most and that's just a lot of raw vote. When you're down 150,000 votes for the rest of the 8% of the vote that's out, every 1 or 2% that comes in, you want to be eating into that margin. And Terry McAuliffe will eat into the margin, but to get all the way back, those loud numbers are a real warning sign.
I want to jump in here for a second, actually, while we are talking about Loudoun, because I do believe that Steve actually just got in some additional Loudoun vote. We're going to go back to our friends in just a second, but what have we got, Steve?
Yeah, we told you we were waiting on a very Terry McAuliffe-friendly pile of absentee ballots, so a lot of that has now just been counted. Remember, a minute ago we were showing you about a 5-point gap there in Loudoun County. This is not all of the vote in Loudoun County. There is still some same-day vote to come in, but you can see it's now changed. McAuliffe with an 11-point advantage in Loudoun County. Now, what is still to come in Loudoun County, there are still some same-day precincts to report, so that could still be a little bit more of a Youngkin-friendly vote. So that now might move with what comes in for the rest of the way here in Loudoun. It might move a little bit more in Youngkin's direction. But again, here's your point of reference. 61-36, 25 points for Joe Biden last year, 25 now sitting at 11 for McAuliffe over Youngkin. That's a significant gain for Glenn Youngkin in this county. We'll see exactly where it lands, but as you've been talking about, if you're Youngkin's campaign, I think your number coming in tonight, you want to be hitting 43, 44%. You'd love to do a little bit better. We will see with the remaining same-day vote if he's able to tick that up to 45 or so. I tell you, if they could hit 45 in Loudoun, I know they'd be very ecstatic. But that is, again, if you're Youngkin, you're basically looking at a number there that you were hoping to get tonight in Loudoun County.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back as these results continue to come in. We'll be back with our friends, our political analysts, with Joy Reid, Nicole Wallace, more with Steve Kornacki. Stay with us. Welcome back to our election night coverage here on MSNBC. As you can see, the two marquee governor's races we are watching tonight are in Virginia and New Jersey. In Virginia, it is too close to call right now, with 47% of the vote in. Too close to call in New Jersey. That is projected as too early to call. No surprise, with just 3% of the vote in New Jersey thus far. But we're watching returns come in both of those states. We'll also be watching some important mayor's races over the course of the night as well.
All right, I want to bring back in our friends and political analysts, Claire McCaskill, David Plouffe, and Julian Castro. And Julian Castro, I want to start with you. You are very good at telling the Democrats hard truths that they need to learn. Given the way this thing is going, and we don't know how it's going to go, we're not projecting anything, but if, in fact, Terry McAuliffe is not able to pull it out and he loses, what lessons do you think the party writ large should take from it, if any?
How long do we have, Joy? I started out this night optimistic. I said it, but as we watch these results come in, and as Steve has pointed out, with a lot of caveats, we're still waiting for the mail vote, and that tends to skew toward the Democrat dramatically. But there are a few races that I've seen at this point that turn around by this many points. So having said that, we're going to see what happens. The lessons, I think, number one, we need to rethink in 2021, going into 2022 and beyond, what we think of as an electable candidate. There has been a lot of oxygen spent blaming the progressives, suggesting that perhaps our best bet is always a centrist candidate. I think we need to rethink that. And these midterms traditionally have been elections where you need to get the base out. You need to get them excited. And if Terry McAuliffe loses, then I think one of the lessons is that we didn't do that. We didn't get them out. I took note, for instance, that he was underperforming in Manassas County, Virginia. Manassas County is over 30% Hispanic. It has one of the biggest Latino populations in the state of Virginia, a significant size of the chunk of the voters. I think another lesson is we need to get better about defending against this cultural wedge play that Republicans do over and over and over again, whether it's on immigration or bathroom politics, or in this case about critical race theory, of taking a fantasy world and making that electoral reality to win these elections. Democrats have not been good about making these elections play out on our own terms. And it'll be fascinating to see what happens in New Jersey, where very early on, Phil Murphy looks like he's doing better. The main issue there was taxes. It was not one of these culture war issues. So it'll be interesting to compare New Jersey and Virginia. Those are a couple of the lessons that we need to take. Rethink what we think of as electable.
And, you know, Claire, just to stay on that note, you know, I had Cori Bush on my show earlier this week, and she continued it in a statement today, just really read the Riot Act to the moderates in the Democratic Party, who have been essentially trying to, in a sense, sort of goad the progressives, that you have to pass the big infrastructure bill, that's all that's important. That's the thing. And if they don't pass it, then it's going to cost the Democrats Virginia. But all the anecdotal evidence that I hear of just people who are motivated voters generally, what's making them feel demotivated, particularly voters of color, it's the other bill being thrown to the side. It's the idea that the Build Back Better bill, which has got all the stuff for women and people of color, that's got all the stuff for environment, for young people, that bill is seen as secondary to Democrats in Washington, and all they care about is the bill that in their mind will win them back, like, you know, white independent voters. Do you think that Democrats can take that lesson out of this, or do you think that they're just going to take the usual lesson and, you know, as Julian Castro just said, go find another centrist and try the same game again next time?
Well, I think it depends entirely on the district, Joy. The Democrats are going to pass this bill, and it's going to have not only these amazing programs for women and families and health care, it's going to bring down prescription drug prices. They cut a deal today to get that done. It's going to be a really massive piece of legislation along with the hard infrastructure, and we can talk about that next year. And if it's a very blue place, then I think it's one thing to talk about just running a progressive candidate. But what happened in Virginia tonight, if it holds up, is that the Republican candidate won more suburban voters and the Democratic candidate won less rural voters. And that isn't a progressive liberal versus really conservative play there. What's really going on here is, can a Republican get away with distancing himself from Trump to get suburban voters back into the Republican camp? And that is really where these districts that swing either way are going to be decided, is in these suburbs. So I can't believe Trump let him do it. And will Trump let all these Republican candidates do it? Will he let them all say, don't you dare come to my state? Or will his ego take over, and then will he start going after Republicans that aren't willing to genuflect and do what he thinks is necessary to worship Donald Trump? So I think there's a lot of Republicans watching this tonight that are running in Pennsylvania and running in Wisconsin and running in Ohio and North Carolina that are trying to figure out how they can get those suburban voters back from Joe Biden.
David Plouffe, I want to press on this. I think we know the answer to some of this. I watched Glenn Youngkin's interviews on Fox News, and he did nothing that he did not. I mean, he worshipped at the altar of Donald Trump on Fox News. He flew an insurrection flag at his rallies. He simply didn't. He played dumb about a Zoom rally. He did not really put much distance between himself and Donald Trump on the big lie or the deadly insurrection in which police officers were maimed by flagpoles. So I think that the real ominous thing is that critical race theory, which isn't real, turned the suburbs 15 points to the Trump insurrection-endorsed Republican. What do Democrats do about that?
Well, I will point out, Nicole, you know, the banning of the books and the flag flying, as appalling as they were, and they got a lot of attention. But I think in Virginia, Youngkin spent months spending millions and millions of dollars running ads, more like he was a Romney Republican. So I do think voters, what is clear, I think, in some of the research that happens after an election, which is incredibly important to dig into what happened here in places like Loudoun. Well, so not everybody bought that he was a Trump clone, number one. Number two, we think critical race theory, and I'm sure it did have an effect here, but this was also a terrible terrain, I think, for Terry McAuliffe. He was a repeat candidate. I think this is going to end up being more of a change election. We still have the pandemic hanging around. I think most voters are weary of that. We've got high gas prices. We've got high cost of living. Washington is not working as well. By the way, that probably matters less in most places of the country, but this is right over the river from the Capitol. So Democrats have to learn what was unique about Virginia, and we'll see maybe in New Jersey, and really understand, why did voters move in the suburbs? Was there turnout differential? Claire's right. Youngkin now has passed Trump's numbers in a lot of these small rural counties, and I think a lot of people probably thought that was the ceiling. And then I agree with, Mr. Castro, who always says such smart things about these message wars and culture wars. Critical race theory was a lie. And I think we need to go on the offense a little bit. And Terry McAuliffe tried to do this. Say it's a lie. They know it's a lie. But are you scared for your kids to learn about slavery or lynching or housing discrimination? Are we raising kids to be that weak? Like, I think sometimes we answer with facts and we don't believe people will believe these things. But they're not going to campaign on the level, Nicole. They are going to lie. They will say anything. If this is a boxing match, they're bringing heavier gloves and knives in their boots. And we have to understand that. I think the terrain for Democrats will be much better a year from now. Hopefully the pandemic will be endemic and it'll be in a rearview mirror. The economy's chugging, and I think we'll have better terrain. But we need to learn these lessons and only have a year to course correct.
I'll tell you, on that point that David Plouffe was just making there in terms of the pandemic, one of the things we haven't talked about that has happened since we have been on the air tonight is that the CDC director has just announced that the CDC has endorsed its vaccine advisory panel's endorsement, and the CDC is now officially recommending vaccinations for kids age 5 to 11 years old. And that is a huge thing toward what David Plouffe just said exactly, which is moving from pandemic to endemic, something that maybe will never be eradicated. Is something that we live relatively normal lives alongside if it is a vaccine-controlled transmissible disease.
Yeah. These education numbers have wrapped in them, and I've heard this from Republicans in Virginia, wrapped in them frustration, exasperation, anger about 18 months of remote school.
That's right.
I think some parents looked at that as something to protect your kids from this unknown new thing, but I think some parents, are angry about that still. And I think, as David's saying, and Democrats are one of the two parties that still, one, accept the results of elections and two, study why they happened. I think unpacking that education number, which Steve said is the number 2 most important issue driving voters.
That's right.
We'll have to include that in that year.
Economy and then education is what we're hearing from voters in terms of what was most motivating them today. But in terms of what motivated voters to do what and how they are voting, Steve is getting in more information. Steve, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, it continues to be. We look at the counties that are getting to 100%, that are getting all the vote in right now, and they just continue to have this pattern we've been talking about. Take a look, Mecklenburg County. Here's Glenn Youngkin at 65%. There was Donald Trump at 57%. So again, that's exactly what Youngkin wanted to be seeing tonight. Here's Middlesex County. It's from Trump at 62. Youngkin is building on that. We're just seeing this pattern. A lot of small rural counties, a lot of counties that were core Trump counties. One of our questions coming in tonight was, does Youngkin meet that number? Does he exceed that number? We're basically seeing him exceed that number, sometimes dramatically, in a lot of different places. Now, this vote is not yet complete here. This is one of the biggest counties, though, in Southwest Virginia, Montgomery. This is where Virginia Tech is. And I mean, you could just see right now, again, there is some McAuliffe-friendly absentee vote that's going to come in here. But again, if Youngkin is running well over 50% here, if he ends up at 52, 53, he's in a great place coming out of there. So there isn't a county I've seen that fits this type where Youngkin isn't getting exactly what he wanted to get at it tonight. Meanwhile, again, we're waiting on there's some more vote to come in Loudoun, but not much. I think it's going to land probably somewhere right about here. If you're the McAuliffe campaign, you wanted more than this out of Loudoun. It wouldn't by itself, if we didn't see anything else on this map tonight and we just saw this, you could piece together, hey, maybe McAuliffe could make it up X, Y, and Z. But when you add in what we're seeing in these rural areas, these Trump-friendly areas in different parts of the state, that becomes a tougher pill to swallow if you're the Democrats. A couple other of the big population centers here in Northern Virginia, we are waiting pretty much just on same-day vote in Arlington County, right outside of Washington, D.C. So again, I think this is going to tick up a few points in Youngkin's favor before all is said and done. Biden was at 80.5. This might come down a few more for McAuliffe before it's over. Fairfax is the big one we are waiting on for the bulk of the vote here. And again, what you're seeing with McAuliffe is This is the mail vote right here that you're looking at. This is the vote by mail. This is the best Democratic vote you're going to see in Fairfax County. This is the best he's going to do. You've still got, I should say, the early vote, and you've still got a lot of the same-day vote that's going to come into this Fairfax total, and I think potentially bring that down a bit here. And again, Youngkin wanted to be getting his number into the 30s. He's taken the biggest hit McAuliffe can give him in Fairfax County. We've counted the mail vote. The rest of it starts to get more Republican-friendly as the rest of the vote comes in here in Fairfax County. So, you know, there is an opportunity there on paper for Youngkin to be getting into the 30s. Does he get into the 30s there in Fairfax County? That's exactly what he would need to do, just given everything else seeing here around the state. He wouldn't need to do much more than the low 30s potentially in Fairfax County. Few other places we're just looking at where, you know, a little bit more than half the vote. We talked at the start of the night, the suburbs of Richmond, Chesterfield County here. This swung to the Democrats during Trump's presidency. Biden won it by about 7 points. Youngkin right now, again, still vote to come, but Youngkin, that's the kind of number he was hoping to get there. Henrico County, this is a little bit more of a Democratic county just north of Richmond. Again, Biden by 30 right now, McAuliffe by 10 with about 3/4 of the vote in. And just take a look again. We identified at the start of the night Virginia Beach is kind of the closest thing to a bellwether in the state. Here's Youngkin. Now, again, I expect this to come down. There's absentee vote to be counted here, but in the same day vote that's coming in, Youngkin's running, I think, where he wants to be running here. About half the total vote is in. You see Youngkin's numbers at 58. This is what it looked like a year ago. Trump finished up at 46%. Again, I think with what's to come, this Youngkin's number is going to come down, but I don't know if it's going to be touching where Trump was a year ago. So there's all sorts of good signs here on the map for Youngkin. If you're Terry McAuliffe right now, what's missing? Well, we don't have any votes out of the state capital, Richmond. That's an 80% Democratic city right there. Again, you're hoping you can get some good news with what's left in Fairfax County. That's a huge county, as I say. It's 13% of the state. There's still vote to come in quite a bit. This Prince William County, you know, core Democratic area. This is just same-day vote we're looking at. There will be absentee vote that comes in here that boosts the McAuliffe number. So there are some opportunities there still for McAuliffe, but that's, you know, he's facing more than a 200,000 vote gap as we get to 60% in here. At the start of the night, if you put this up and said at 60% in, this is where you are. Rachel, this gets back to what you were saying earlier. You were onto it very early. If you're the Youngkin campaign, I think this is where you'd love to be at about 60% in.
Well, Steve, in terms of just those raw vote totals, and I was struck by this because David Plouffe was talking about it in these terms. Tell us again what the overall deficit is in terms of raw number of vote that McAuliffe is looking at, and then how many votes are still outstanding in Fairfax?
Yeah, so you're looking at, as you can see right here, this is the difference statewide, 207,000 votes for Youngkin, and you're looking at, so at about 40% in here in Fairfax County, that's about 160,000 votes. You know, I do think we can end up getting somewhere upwards of 400,000 votes cast in Fairfax County, so there's still a significant amount right there. In fact, let me just see what we're landing at here for our. I think I have the exact estimate here right now. We think maybe about 250,000 remaining here. So there is an opportunity here, as I say, for McAuliffe to get quite a few votes. You do have to balance that with there are outstanding votes and in some cases outstanding counties still that are going to be Youngkin friendly. So it's not just the Democrats can get a big number out of Fairfax and then that's it. But the lead here that Youngkin's driving up in the Trump areas is substantial.
All right, we're going to take a quick break now. We're going to come back and take a look right off the other side of the break at what's going on in New Jersey. Again, it's been about 36 minutes since the polls closed in New Jersey. That is the other governor's race tonight. It has been since 1977 that New Jersey voters have decided to give a Democratic governor a second term. Phil Murphy is trying to do that tonight. We'll have a look at how that's shaping up for him right off the other side of this. Stay with us. We have a change in the decision desk's projection on the Virginia governor's race. We started off with it being too early to call, then it was too close to call. Now the projection is that it is too close to call in the Virginia governor's race, but Republican Glenn Youngkin holds a lead in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Again, still at base, too close to call, but Youngkin in the lead. Right now at this hour, the projection in the New Jersey governor's race is that it is still too early to call. As you can see there, there's only about 6% of the vote in. But this is Democrat Phil Murphy trying to win a very, 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 very rare Democratic second term as a New Jersey governor. That is something New Jersey voters have not wanted to do for the past 40-plus years. But Jack Ciattarelli right now at 32% and incumbent Phil Murphy over 60%. Steve, we're looking right now at both of these races. I'll give you dealer's choice in terms of what you'd like to tell us in terms of what interesting vote is out there and coming in.
Yeah, I mean, we'll just take a look at continuing in Virginia right now, because, again, about 60%, you got the characterization from the decision desk, the picture coming more and more into focus. We said a little while ago the question was, look, Youngkin was driving up the numbers more than the numbers he was going to need in the smaller counties, the rural areas. The question was, would McAuliffe be able to answer equally in sort of the big Democratic areas? We talked a lot about Fairfax County. We got a lot more of the vote in, and here you go now. More than half the vote is in Fairfax County. Again, that includes the most Democratic-friendly, the most McAuliffe-friendly type of vote there. That's the mail vote. And by comparison to 2020, now that McAuliffe number is under by a few points where Joe Biden was. And again, it could come down further. There is still a lot of same-day vote. Same-day vote is the most Republican-friendly type of vote we tend to find. There's still a lot of that to come here. So, again, McAuliffe now running under the Biden number, the possibility of going lower there in Fairfax County. One little clue we may have in Fairfax County, the way things work in Virginia is they've got all these little sort of islands you see within counties here. They've got independent cities within counties in some case. Here's the most confusing one. Inside of Fairfax County, they've got Fairfax City. Fairfax City is much smaller than Fairfax County, but it tends to, the vote patterns are pretty similar. When Fairfax County moves this way, Fairfax City moves this way. When Fairfax County moves this way, Fairfax City moves this way. All a long way of saying we've got basically all the vote in Fairfax City. Now, I think this might be a clue of what's to come with Fairfax County. And check this out. In Fairfax City, Biden got 68% of the vote in 2020. McAuliffe now down to about 63.5% of the vote. Trump was under 30. Youngkin now up to 35 and change right here. So if you're Youngkin, Fairfax City itself is relatively small. But if you're doing that, if you're doing that kind of a jump in Fairfax County as well, that is exactly what Glenn Youngkin's campaign wanted to do. They want to get into the mid-30s if they can in Fairfax County tonight. And again, it's so critical for McAuliffe right now because of the margins that Youngkin's driving up in these Republican areas. The only chance McAuliffe, as I say, is to answer with a huge performance of his own. He's got to answer with a Biden level of support at this point in Fairfax County. Now he can't be within a few points of it. He can't be falling off 4 or 5 points in a place like Fairfax City. He's got to be answering because this is where he's going to get the votes. If he is going to make up close to 200,000 votes statewide. He's got to get a ton of them out of here. And right now, the pace just doesn't look like it's going to match that. And you just look at Virginia Beach, we showed you before. Youngkin, about half the vote in, getting what he wants there. Chesapeake's not much in right now. So, again, for good reason, you see that characterization of Youngkin from our decision desk. For good reason, based on what we're seeing here in Northern Virginia. And just we could check in on Jersey if you want. You mention it. What we're basically looking at in New Jersey right now, 6%, and you see Murphy is just pouring it on. You're basically looking at mail, vote by mail. So again, just most Democratic vote. There's nothing in this mail vote that you would look at and say, wow, New Jersey's in for a big surprise here. But let's see when we start to get some same-day vote if there's a big shift here at all. But this is about, as I said, this is about what you'd expect. Give you an example. We've got, I think, some same-day, in fact, even in this county, and just give you a sense here. Biden won 50% here. Ciattarelli needs to be getting up to 55, 60% in a county like Gloucester County. He's going to need a huge, huge same-day number to do that. So it's very early in New Jersey, but there's no immediate sign there that one looks different than expected.
All right, Steve, thank you very much. Again, we're watching both of those come in right now. The characterization in Virginia is that it is too close to call, but Glenn Youngkin is in the lead. The characterization in the New Jersey governor's race is that it is too early to call. But polls have closed in both of those states, and we're continuing to watch those votes as they come in.
All right. Well, Trump-approved Republican Glenn Youngkin's closing message to Virginia voters has almost singularly focused on weaponizing race, stoking hysteria over the coded boogeyman of critical race theory, which is not currently taught in any Virginia public school. From banning Toni Morrison's Beloved, this epic novel, a Pulitzer Prize-winning seminal work of American fiction that recounts the horrors of slavery, to casting himself as the candidate of so-called parents' rights, vowing to ban critical race theory, which again is not taught if elected. Again, it's not taught in any Virginia public schools. With us now is Cornell Belcher, Democratic pollster and MSNBC political analyst, who's also a Virginia native. And Cornell, I asked this question of Julian Castro earlier, and I will ask it of you now. What lessons, if in fact the results that we see right now prevail and Glenn Youngkin becomes the next governor of Virginia, what lessons should Democrats take from it, and what lessons do you think Republicans will take from it?
Well, a couple of things, Joy, and it is one, and I said this earlier, you know, even more so than Youngkin versus Terry McAuliffe, I think Trumpism and critical race theory is on the ballot. And what you're seeing, whether Terry, and still a lot of votes out, but whether or not Terry makes this up or not, I think tonight is a victory for critical race theory. Because if you look at McAuliffe, and again, it's still early, it's not a lot of votes out, but if you look at McAuliffe's margins, so they're way off of what Biden's margins are. And in a place like Loudoun, Biden won that by, what, close to 20 points. You know, he's only winning it by 10. You know, Virginia Beach, a really sort of critical swing area that swung for Biden, you know, that is now too close to call. Wherever you look, it looks like these college-educated suburban white voters who Democrats thought were breaking their way, you know, they rallied back around critical race theory. And again, you know, for me, critical race theory, Joy, is just the most recent, more eloquent iteration of the Southern strategy, right? Whether it be crosstown busing, whether it be the welfare queen, whether it be defund the police. This original sin of America keeps evolving, and critical race theory is the most latest and most eloquent, quite frankly, iteration of the Southern strategy, in a way, quite frankly, to tribalize an election, to tribalize an electorate in a way to drive up the white vote. And whether Terry comes back or not, I think that critical race theory was central to Youngkin's sort of close here, and that he's made it so close. And a lot of these suburban areas where Democrats thought they were making ground in, I think we're going to see this again in the midterm, and it's going to be problematic.
Yeah, and let me bring in Jason Johnson. I think we have his camera up there. Jason Johnson, to that very point, Christopher Rufo did a speech at the Claremont Institute, and he's one of the people who's been the most eager and active in pushing Republicans to use this as a strategy to turn out their vote and to pull in suburban voters. And he admitted at the Claremont Institute that he had no idea what critical race theory is and doesn't care what it is, but that whenever what he wants is that when white voters see any story that makes them uncomfortable, anything that's about wokeism or, you know, multiculturalism that makes them mad, he wants them to think critical race theory and then vote Republican. It's a strategy that they were not hiding. It's been very open, and the Claremont Institute and others, they've been very open about it. What does it say to you that Glenn Youngkin was able to, we don't know how this is going to turn out, we should go and say again with these too close to call, but if Youngkin wins based on using that strategy, is Cornell right? This is the new Lee Atwater strategy, and it's going to be used over and over and over again.
I rarely disagree with Cornell on air. I gotta disagree with him on this. Look, here, the only reason that we're talking about critical race theory is because Glenn Youngkin had 18 months to convince people that he was not a fire-breathing, horns out of his skull racist. You can only talk about critical race theory if you present yourself as the kind of neutral white guy who's like, I don't dislike brown people. I just think this is going a little too far. So it only works if you've been able to present yourself as neutral or non-hostile on race issues. That's not something that a lot of Republicans are very good at. And I saw somebody put this very eloquently online. They said, look, you know, Glenn Youngkin ran pretending to be Larry Hogan. He's going to govern like Mike DeWine, but to his base, they think he's Ron DeSantis. And that's what this is. It was a very sneaky triangulation. Because if you run on critical race theory and you're a screaming MAGA hat-wearing maniac, then you're going to lose those suburban people because they don't want to be associated with that.
Right.
So I think it's only an effective strategy if you've been able to put 4 or 5, 6 other things in line. Anybody else who runs on critical race theory, if you don't have the proper candidate to promote the message, it's not going to get you anywhere.
Cornell, I think Monmouth had the last poll on independent voters in Virginia. They swung 18 points. Whatever the sins of Youngkin's strategy, it would appear if he prevails by closing the gap 15 points in Loudoun and really eating into President Obama and President Biden's margins in those kinds of counties, that, you know, Youngkin might be the talk of the next sort of presidential candidate in the GOP. I mean, his stock, if he wins tonight, his stock will soar. And I wonder at what point figuring out how to defeat that kind of Republican becomes the full focus of the Democratic Party.
No, that's a really good point. And to my friend Jason's point is that Youngkin is a different kind of Republican. And the question to you, quite frankly, is that I don't think either one of us think that Youngkin can win a Republican primary on the national level. I think when you look at sort of how he's tried to, quite frankly, be a more sort of, I mean, his first ads, people in Virginia thought, well, is he even a Republican, right? He sort of soft-pedaled this Republicanism and kept Trump at a distance. I don't think you can win a Republican primary. And by the way, the Virginia Republican primary, as we know, was set up for him. I don't think you can win a national primary not being full on Trump. But I think what Republicans do take from this, and I know whether he wins or loses, he's made Virginia so close that Republicans are going to take this and they're going to try to do this again and again and again going into the midterms. And believe me, the Republican Congressional Campaign Committee and the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, they're going to try to recruit candidates who look more like Youngkin than they do the Trumpers. Now, I think they'll have problems in the primary, but I think that's the battle going forward for the Republican Party is can they recruit and win in the primary with Youngkin-like candidates? Because if they do, they can make a lot more of these districts competitive.
Can I just say, though, Bob McDonnell, right? Since 2005, there have been like 14 major statewide races in Virginia. Democrats have won 13 of them before tonight. Bob McDonnell was the exception. Yeah. After Barack Obama won the presidency in 2008, Bob McDonnell won in 2009. And what did the Republicans do? They instantly elevated him to presidential status. They had to give the response to the State of the Union. He was going to be the answer to, you can't beat Obama by being a fire-breathing, terrible guy. You have to seem mild-mannered. You got to kind of carry yourself like a dentist. And he was going to be their, he was going to be their savior. And then Bob McDonnell was a terrible governor in Virginia who ran on crazy policies that made no sense and that made Virginia a scandal and got them boycotted nationwide. Yeah. Remember the like mandatory vaginal ultrasound stuff? I mean, and then he gets run out of office on a bizarre corruption scandal. I mean, how you comport yourself once in office is going to make the difference here. And that's part of why one of the things we need to watch tonight is whether or not Youngkin is going to have Republican control in the state legislature. Yeah. House of Delegates, if that flips tonight and becomes Republican controlled, he may ultimately be putting together something that looks like a governing Republican Party in Virginia, which is going to be a much harder thing to get himself to the presidential aspirations than if he's got a divided government.
You said that and I immediately thought George Allen. Yeah, that was the other one who sort of was set up as like he was going to be the man, and then he was. If he's able to set up this governing majority, then the question becomes what happens in 2024 when all Republican governors will be under tremendous pressure to do whatever it takes and whatever they can if Donald Trump is running for president to swing the election, to refuse to seat electors, to do the entire Trump wish list. And the question is, would he withstand it? He doesn't seem to be somebody who would withstand it. We'll see.
We're going to take a quick break right now. I want to say thank you to Jason Johnson, Cornell Belcher. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you with us tonight. We're going to take a quick break. When we're coming back, we're going to be checking back in on both those governor's races again. Too early to call in New Jersey, too close to call with Republican Glenn Youngkin in the lead in Virginia. Stay with us. Lots more ahead tonight.